Welcome to our second quarter live stream for Roman Catholic Media. I'm Stephen Heiner, and with us for this live stream is His Excellency Bishop Donald Sanborn. Hello, Your Excellency.
Hello, Stephen.
We're counting down towards your Golden Jubilee and the ordination of 2 new priests for the Institute.
Yes.
It's come very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm speaking about both things, Your Excellency, the Jubilee and the ordination.
Yes, they nicely come together. Yes, more or less.
Do you feel like 50 years of priesthood have passed by very quickly?
Oh, it's hard to say. There's been a lot of events. There's, it seems like a long time ago when I was ordained. You just do your job, and the years go by. I don't think about it too much.
Well, I think about you in a pre-internet era, Your Excellency, when people were typing up newsletters, and then people were mailing newsletters out, or you'd find them in the back of some chapel, and then now here you are doing live streams on the internet.
Yes, the word is much easier to get out now than it was in 1975. I mean, it was, newsletters and mail-outs and buying mailing lists of conservative Catholics. And if you got a 2% return, that was really great. I remember those figures. And it was expensive. You had to mail them out and all. There's a much greater facility now as far as getting the word out.
People may not know that the two things that you relate to really changing the apostolate, Your Excellency, one of them is the jet engine, and the second is the internet.
Yes, those are the two best friends of the traditional movement. I always say that is the jet engine and the internet.
And you had one of those things in the 70s.
We had the jet engine, yes, and we used it a great deal. We flew around a lot, and that's when you had non-stops. You didn't have the hub system. And so you could fly from this place to that place fairly easily.
Were you flying on 707s? I mean, this must have been much older Boeing planes back then, or maybe some DC planes also.
No, I mean, the local ones were done by the 727. That was the standard, and the DC-9.
Okay.
We were always on one of those because we were going in short hauls, usually. The other planes were reserved for flights to California or long-haul flights. But my first flight was on a DC-8 to Switzerland in 1971. And that was fine. I remember looking out the window, and there was a light on the wing, and I thought, gosh, there's a full moon tonight. Bring it out. That's a light on the wing. So that was my first flight,
and more than 1 million miles later.
Yes, on Delta alone, I have 1,250,000, and that was when they started to count. It was in 1981 that American Airlines instituted that miles business, and so I have a number from that time, and now they have all different kinds of, but my number is an old number, and they still respect it.
I say number 47 or something like that.
So that's I have a lot of miles before they started counting, and I don't even know how many. I don't know if American counts your total number of miles, but it would be pretty high.
And the last time I think we checked, I think you had at least couple 100,000 miles that you've done on American.
Yes,
also.
Yeah, in recent years, yes, but no, I really don't. It's a lot. I figured that on an average, I've gone to Europe once a year as an average, so that's 50 times round trips to Europe. That's a lot. People say, have you ever been here or there? I said, well, how many times have been here or there? Have you been to Rome? And I'm thinking maybe 10 times I've been to Rome or better, but most of that was for, occasionally it was tourism, but most of it was
for work.
For work, yes, it was. I mean, it just... and you would always see something when you're there for work, but it was mostly that. I would say 90% of that was that kind of travel. So I'm a little traveled out. I never thought I would say that, but
it takes a lot. I mean, 50, and that's just Europe, and we're not counting going to Australia either.
Australia, and I've been to Russia twice, and went to Brazil once.
Well, one of the things that you had to do in the 70s when you got ordained a priest was you had to get a chalice and a paten for yourself. What's the process for doing that, Your Excellency? There's not exactly chalices are us. How does a young priest go
Well, there
about?
are chalices. Well, pretty much today, that's another thing that has changed so much. My chalice I saw at the Huntington Seminary. They had it out, and for some reason I was there visiting somebody. This was in 1974 or 75 or something. I saw it out, and I thought that's a really nice chalice. And but they would never sell it to me. So I knew a Novus Ordo priest in the Archdiocese of New York, who only a year or two or so passed away, and he bought it for me. And so it was a big favor. And so then that's my chalice. I still have it. I had it improved a little bit with jewels over the years. And
You've got to find those people too.
yes, it cost at that time $1,200. I've seen its equivalent, and even actually the actual chalice, because it was reproduced quite a bit at the time. It's from 1878 in Paris. And now it's going for something about 10,000 or 11,000.
Okay.
That is in the unimproved model. So when you improve it with jewels and all,
Sure,
it runs it up. So, but no, there's plenty of places. Of course, eBay is
They're
loaded
not
with
called
chalices.
chalices are us, but there are places.
Yes,
you're saying.
yes, it's Fluminalis in Holland. If you want to spend more money
Spend the
than
big
you
bucks.
possibly could ever get in your life, they have
It's a dangerous place to go with Bishop Sanborn. If you're in Belgium and he suggests stopping by Fleu.
It's all Holland.
If you're in the Netherlands and you want to stop by, just make sure you've got a lot of money with you. If you're Bishop Sanborn.
Yes, it's. I always compare it like a drunk going into a bar.
It's dangerous.
It's something to stay away from.
Dangerous to take Bishop Sanborn to Fluminalis.
And no, and as a matter of fact, I'm going to Europe in July, and I'm taking KLM, so I'm changing planes in Amsterdam. So it's hop, skip, and a jump over.
So with that's my segue, Your Excellency. We have two deacons, one of whom is almost completely done fundraising for his chalice, and one who's almost completely done. And I wanted you to give some context. What would a deacon these days, if he wanted to go out into the marketplace, expect to spend? Obviously not $1,200 and not $12,000.
You can spend almost anything you want. You can get a very modest chalice for maybe $1,000.
Do you buy a chalice as a new priest, thinking this is the chalice I'm going to have for the rest of my life?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I mean, it doesn't mean that you would never get another chalice. Somebody might give it to you, but it is something special about your first chalice. It's your priesthood, a symbol of your priesthood in a way. And so, it's. But you can spend almost anything you want on it. And but I would say you're not going to see anything decent for less than $1,000, but you can go straight up into many, many hundreds of, or maybe probably, 30, 40, 50,000. So some,
Wow.
Rare. That's rare. But you get into the very, very fine chalices at about 10 to 15,000.
Okay. Well, if you would like to be part of contributing to one of the chalices for our clergy to be ordained next week, they won't be on this live stream, so don't send a super chat. Don't send a donation. Contact us on the seminary website, mhtseminary.org, and use chalice as the subject line and let us know, and we'll put you in contact with the deacons, and you can contribute to them directly for the chalice. So with that said, Your Excellency, that's for the deacons preparing for their ordination. You've got to do some practice for that, but I feel you've got ordinations pretty much down. You've done a few.
Yes, you always have to review the ceremony though, because you don't want anything to go wrong, and you want to do everything correctly. So I was just reading this ceremony recently, but yes, you do get the basic route.
And anything you might forget, you'll get pushed or told or.
By the MC, and there's the archpriest and the deacon and the subdeacon, and yes, you would be told right away, But no, it's really not that complicated. You just have to. There's a lot going on, so it's hard to keep your mind on it as everything moves. There's a lot of things going on, in the ceremony, but it's a beautiful ceremony.
Well, we're looking forward to it, Your Excellency. There's a lot of people who will be praying for these new priests coming in to help the Institute out.
Yes.
If you are coming into the stream now for the first time, please consider hitting like. This will boost the video in the algorithm. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat. I will do my best to get through them as quickly as I can. If you haven't already posted, let us know where you are watching from today, and I will read those out to His Excellency when we have a moment. Matthew, $10. Thank you, Matthew. Your Excellency, we know the Magisterium cannot teach heresy, but what about error? I've seen clergy give different responses to this question. What are your thoughts?
Well, it cannot teach pernicious error. That is, it cannot teach something that would be harmful to souls, or something that would be harmful to souls. That would affect the eternal salvation of souls. It cannot do that, but and it depends on the level of magisterium. So there's all sorts of levels of magisterium according to the will of the Roman pontiff. As if he wants to define, or if he simply wants to do what is known as pontifical magisterium, which is not considered infallible in itself, because he has no will to do that, but it is authoritative and you have to give assent to it. See, but it is not the same assent that you would give to something that he defines. See, so it really depends on what he's talking about. He might be giving a talk, an informal talk or something like that. He might say something that is erroneous, but not something that would harm your soul.
You're leading me to think of maybe a factual error, Your Excellency, something like he meant to say Brazil and he said Argentina, or there's a typo in the text.
Yeah, I can't think of an example. I don't think there's ever been an example.
Because when you say pernicious error, I'm trying to remove that adjective and think, okay, well, a non-harmful error, what would that even look like?
Yes, well, the idea harmful to your soul, and if he said that it's okay to murder people, or he can't. He's. But I can't think of an example because there's never been such a thing. I can't think of a single time when he said something erroneous. I can't think of...
So your qualification would be pernicious error?
Yes.
Okay. All right, Matthew, I hope that answers your question. If you have a follow-up, please feel free to put that in the chat. Crusader Filmworks, $5. Thank you, Crusader. Hello, Your Excellency. What are your thoughts on this conflict escalating? Could it lead to World War II if people do not cease sinning?
World War III.
World War III? Yeah. Where's my mind?
Well, that area has been a tinderbox since 1948. So, when you drive people off of their homes that they've had since the time of Hadrian the Emperor, and even before that, before Joshua took it over by the command of God, but the Romans took the Jews out of Palestine and called it Palestine. That was Hadrian the Emperor in the 130s AD. And they had possession of that under the Turkish Empire and various other rulers for all of that time. And when you drive people off at the point of a gun, you're asking for it. They're going to be irritated for centuries, and there's going to be no peace in that area. It's always going to be a conflict. So, I remember back, I was in a debate society in high school in the 1960s, and there was a debate about this whole thing, and one of us said that yes, there's speculation that the Third World War will come from the conflicts in the Middle East between Israel and the...
And you said that in the 60s.
The 1960s, so this has been going on for over 50 years, almost 60 years. Yeah, no, it's just been a hotbed of conflict. It will never end. The idea that somehow everybody's going to be comfortable with Israel is a pipe dream. And I wouldn't be surprised if, after this conflict, if a lot of Israelis just say, how can you live here? After the Gaza conflict and then the Iranian conflict, how can we proceed here? How can you raise children here? How can you feel safe? But it's that's what it is. I think that everybody should just stay out of it and let them fight it out amongst themselves.
Do you think that the president will allow the U.S. to get drawn into this? Because the war beats for Iran have been drumming for 30 years.
I don't think so. He got elected as a non-war president, and somebody that would not get us involved in all of these things that we have been involved in for so long. No, I think that he would only attack Iran if the Iranians attack us. But I don't think you would see a full-scale war. I think he might hit Iran or something like that. But I don't think you would see a full-scale war because he doesn't. I don't think he has that idea of getting involved in other wars, other people's wars. We're not the policeman for the whole world.
I can only hope that you're right, Your Excellency. That's my wish as well. So we have people from San Antonio, Texas, Brazil, SSPX from Detroit, New Braunfels, Texas, Sierra Marion, Georgia, Phoenix. Welcome, everybody. $7 from Nikhil in Singapore. Your Excellency, have you noticed a greater acceptance of the thesis in recent years?
Yes. I think it answers a lot of questions for people that were disturbed about Sedevacantism. I know of a good number of people who said, I wouldn't be a Sedevacantist except for the thesis, because they see the problem of the continuity of the apostolic succession. That's the theological problem in Sedevacantism. And it answers that. Yes, I have seen more interest in it than previous. Also, we've done a lot to make it more understandable. You have to make certain distinctions in it that are somewhat abstract, but we've done a lot to make that easier for people.
He had a follow-up from the last live stream, which we weren't able to get to, for $150. Thank you. What are the best philosophical and theological arguments against the reincarnation of the soul, as espoused by many Eastern religions? In my part of the world, Southeast Asia, it's a very common belief. God bless the Institute.
Well, first of all, there's theological, and that is the church condemns it. Number two is that the soul and the body are made for each other. You see, so your soul can only go with your body, and it's hand in glove, you might say. And so it is impossible that the soul of a man become the soul of a cat or a dog in a future time, or even somebody else's soul. You see. Of a human being. They're made for each other. That's the philosophical. See, it's act and potency, what we call act and potency. And there's a fit, just like a jigsaw puzzle. There's a fit, and it only goes with one piece. So that's the philosophical reasoning behind it. And there's absolutely no evidence for it. I mean, it's just somebody's crazy idea.
We don't have any flies who've written any symphonies later talking about how they were a musician in a past life.
No Beethoven's among the flies.
They write Lord of the Flies, potentially. Nikhil, if you have a follow-up to that, please let me know in the chat, but I hope that His Excellency answered your question there. Another question that had come in, Your Excellency, from someone who is down in Wangaratta in Australia, so it's morning over there. I have family who are in the freedom spectrum, mostly understandably as a result from the COVID lockdowns and heavy tyranny in the state of Victoria. However, with the absence of God and true religion, they have become what I call anarchist and are tangled up in groups advocating to become so-called sovereign citizens who declare themselves to be free from the government authority by reconveyancing. To them, this means they exit the corporate entity their birth certificate put them in. They pay to have paperwork done which releases them from the authority of the state, and then they can use the roads, run businesses, and live in their homes without paying taxes, registration fees, rates, garbage disposal fees, because they are now so-called sovereign citizens. They have a reputation of clogging up the court system, not paying speeding fines, and of course it's subjective as to who has the right position in their books. One angle they claim is on Boniface VIII's papal bull Unam Sanctam that this was the start of the fictitious judicial system, Ancestui Cavi trust, as the Pope owns all lives, as they had to be registered with the Vatican, and thus is culpable of the entire legal system's corruption and lack of so-called freedom since 1302. If you could talk about this a little bit and potentially do a video on what the Catholic position is on its role in government, why we have authority, and what Boniface VIII actually meant, that would be helpful. It's a tall order, Your Excellency. But...
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm not familiar with that quote of or what Boniface VIII said concerning that, but I venture to say that it is not what they make it to be. Government belongs to natural law. All right, that's the Catholic position, that human beings by natural law must enter into society and establish government in order to live correctly, and that the power of the government comes from God. All authority comes from God. That's a quote from St. Paul. All right, so the Catholic Church has always been very, very supportive of government. Even in the Roman Empire, when the emperors were persecuting the church, they never in any way called in question the authority of the Roman emperor. Gregory the 16th told the Polish that they were wrong to revolt against Tsar Nicholas I of Russia, who was persecuting them in Poland. Do not revolt against them because he is the legitimate authority in Poland. The church never foments revolution, never foments any kind of resistance to authority unless the law is unjust. You see, if a law is unjust, obviously you can resist it, but you cannot rise up and revolt. You see, but I mean, these people are saying that we can live without society, we can live without laws. We can repudiate the authority of God invested in legitimate governments. That is something absolutely contrary to Catholic teaching.
Yeah, I sometimes call it "no one's the boss of me" doctrine, Your Excellency. That these people just want to revert to.
It's liberalism gone wild, and it's as leftist could be. It's hanging off the port side of the ship. It's a leftist. People think of that as something rightist. No, it's leftist, and it leads to socialism.
I'm sure that some of those sovereign citizens would be shocked to hear themselves called a leftist, Your Excellency.
Oh, they're super leftists.
Yeah. Well, you heard it here. This was Jeremy from Wangaratta, so I hope that answers your question. If you have a follow-up, please feel free to put that in the chat. Teodoro Boggio, $5. Thank you, Teodoro. Did Bishop Gerard Delorier really say that the basis for traditional priests to hear confessions is not based on supplied jurisdiction?
He said that the priest receives, and this is the opinion of Cajetan. You see, this is, again, theological opinion, but this is the position of Cajetan. He said that the priest receives the power to forgive sins. However, when he is a member of a diocese or a religious order, is subject to some authority, that ability to do that is restricted to certain subjects. For example, the people in the diocese, or it used to be years ago, the people in your parish. See, but it is something that in itself is universal. See, it's a power, and it's merely restricted to a certain area that's known as sacramental jurisdiction. You see?
Would you say for bureaucratic reasons, Your Excellency, almost?
No, just not bureaucratic. It's just that there should be you might say, a government of that the priests are subject to the bishop. The bishop is the priest of the diocese. They are his helpers, and his jurisdiction does not go beyond the borders of his diocese. So the next bishop can, do what he wants. You see, so you didn't have sort of a free for all. And if priests went from one diocese to another, they had to contact the chancery for jurisdiction for confessions in that diocese. That was but because there is a lack of authority now because of their adherence to modernism and their teaching of modernism, the priests are able to hear confessions universally. Then that's his theory.
Position.
Yes, his position. Yes.
That's not based on supplied jurisdiction.
No, that's not based on supply. It's just that there is no limitation of his sacramental jurisdiction.
Is there another name for this?
I'm sure there is, but I don't know it. But that's
okay.
No, there's not an ism on that. No.
All right. I hope that answers your question, Teodoro. If you have a follow-up, please put that in the chat. $20 from Jerry Travers. Thank you, Jerry. Does the Institute view the Pope as the proximate rule of faith? Some R&R groups say we err in making the Pope the proximate rule of faith.
Yes, the teaching of the Church is the proximate rule of faith. Yes. And he's the author of the teaching of the Church. Yes, he's the Cardinal Billot called him the living rule of faith.
And the rule of faith cannot err?
Right. The Church, in its universal teachings and disciplines, cannot err. That's indefectibility.
So how would we answer the R&R groups who say that we err in making the Pope the proximate rule of faith?
Well, they're just wrong. They err.
Is there a council teaching, something that comes out to your top of your mind, Your Excellency?
Other
than
just the general teaching of the Church with regard to the role of the Roman Pontiff, that he is the ultimate norm of what we should believe.
Ubi Petrus est ibi Ecclesia.
Yes, and that he has the power to teach, the supreme power to teach. I mean, that's really the dispute in the Filioque. With the Greek Orthodox, they say, "Oh, we don't accept Filioque." Well, is the council, a local council, the supreme authority of what we should believe, or the Pope? So it boils down to really the rejection of the Pope. You see, but the Pope is the supreme teaching authority. So it doesn't go beyond him. And so even if you had a general council and all of the council fathers voted yes on a certain doctrine, and he said no, then it's no. That's how powerful he is. The whole thing is put in the trash. He has the ultimate say. So he is, yes, the proximate norm of belief in the sense that he gives us dogmas. You see, you need the teaching authority of the Church to know what we should believe. Otherwise, we're like Protestants, Oh, I think this, I think that. I read the Bible.
I have a personal relationship.
Yeah. And that's sort of the soul of Catholicism.
So we have a Latin question here, Your Excellency. Right. Teodoro for $10. Thank you, Teodoro. It was said that Father Sebastian Trumpf, who worked on Mystici Corporis, put subsistit in Lumen Gentium, and that the word is stronger, he says deeper, than est. And Trump was at an ecumenical meeting after Vatican II. I don't know if you know who this priest is, Your Excellency, but I suppose the clear question here is subsistit in stronger than est? Deeper?
No. Subsisted in something subsists in something else. You see, that means if you go to that document, it talks about the Church of Christ. The Church of Christ, it says, is composed of all of those who look with faith toward Jesus. That's the definition of the Church of Christ in Lumen Gentium. Then it's a lot of blah, 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 blah. And then this church, meaning the Church of Christ, as it is organized in the world, subsists in the Roman Catholic Church. That means the Church of Christ and the Roman Catholic Church are two different things. Est means they are the same thing. You see, in Latin and in all...
In English.
Everything. Subsist in means that you gain your existence in something else. So it means that those are two different things. And that's the heresy of Lumen Gentium.
Who is this Father Sebastian Trumpf?
He was a theologian, but I mean, in all scholastic terminology, and you would be using scholastic terminology in there, subsisted in means two different things, all right? And that's a heresy to say that the church as it is organized. And that's exactly what has come out of Vatican II. You see, there is a Roman Catholic Church, which is an organization, but then there's other churches and ecclesial communions and all of this stuff that participate in the notion of church. They're part of the Church of Christ, but they're not part of the Roman Catholic communion. You see, not fully anyway. See, there's full communion, there's partial. That's all Lumen Gentium, and it's all hogwash and heresy.
Well, I think His Excellency is clear on that. Afternoon from the Pacific Northwest. Bob Meyer has blast from the past here, Your Excellency.
Yes, Bob Meyer.
In the practical order, what would you say is the difference between accepting the thesis and being a totalist? Do you think in the practical order there's any difference? That's what he's asking.
Practical order. Well, not as far as the unicum mass or your day-to-day devotion, you might say, but the how you regard the ultimate outcome of this crisis, I would say. The totalists have a problem with explaining the continuity of apostolic succession, and what they propose is usually absurd. I've never heard anything but absurd proposals for that, and so there's a temptation to conclavism, and that is where traditional bishops get together and vote for a pope and set up their own papacy.
There are clergy and faithful who hope for this, Your Excellency.
Yes,
They'd like you to get on board.
I just saw an article in a recent publication of a large traditionalist organization supporting such an idea.
So you won't be getting on board that train anytime soon?
No, no, thank you. No, that is an absolutely crazy, ludicrous solution, quote unquote. It would just cause far more problems than there are now. No, it's so that in that sense, in the practical order, there is there's a practical difference in
day to day.
Day to day, no, I wouldn't say it's going to affect your practical order too much.
But I suppose practical order, Your Excellency, too, as you said, if you're talking to potential converts, you have a solution in broad outlines for them as to how this might be resolved. It doesn't mean it's going to happen in exact detail that you would know,
right?
But you have an outline for it, and maybe in the practical order, if you're instructing a convert, they say, "Well, how would you solve this?" And then you can.
Yes, it's a big objection to Sedevacantism for a lot of people. That there's no way to fix this, so to speak.
Teodoro for $2. Thank you, Teodoro. How does the church deal with cases of marital abuse?
Well, what do you mean by marital abuse?
I'm going to guess that this person means some sort of either physical or emotional so-called abuse of the other spouse. And I think perhaps the person is asking, does the church allow for people to be separated or to live elsewhere?
Yes, the church allows for people to be separated, but it was always up to the decision of the bishop. All those cases had to go to the bishop.
Okay.
For separation, but then you can never remarry until your spouse dies. That's how it would. But it had to be severe. I mean, today, when you say marital abuse, that means, does the husband want to be the head of the house? I mean, the feminism has destroyed family life, and so they would consider the husband's authority as abuse because they want to be the authority.
I was abused by being asked to cook a meal or do the dishes or something.
I think the husbands are more abused than the wives today, in my opinion.
Well, you deal with more marriage cases than most people do, Your Excellency. ABF, 14 Canadian dollars. Thank you, ABF. Your Excellency, what would you say to those of us who remain in the Post-Vatican II Church, not out of agreement, but out of fear that leaving its visible structure might endanger our souls? God bless you.
Well, I do think there's a lot of people in or practicing the Novus Ordo religion that have some are in good conscience for some reason or another, as they see that this is what purports to be the Catholic faith. This comes from Rome. It is in Roman Catholic churches, etc. And they say to themselves, well, I don't like it, but I have to go along with it for the reason that it's there. They might be in good conscience. That means that they do not see themselves as doing something wrong through no fault of their own, that maybe through doubts or something like that. It's hard to get into someone's head. But, if they understand that there is a change of religion and they still adhere to that transformed religion, then they are no different from the Protestants. See, the only difference is that it comes with a Catholic label on it. That's all. But the Catholic label is phony because these people are modernists and they have hijacked the institutions of the church. So there's a point where everyone says, is this Catholic or not? And that's when you have to make a very, very clear decision.
And to your point about good conscience, Your Excellency, I get that, but at some point you also have to check your eyes and your brain at the door.
Yes.
So, I accept this. This must be Roman Catholicism because it says Catholic on the label outside. But if I remove my brain, I remove my eyes, then certainly this must be Catholicism.
Yes. No, I can't get into everyone's conscience, but I could see that happening. That's all I'm saying. But I don't see how anybody could go to the Novus Ordo and say this is continuity with the past.
The church doesn't ever ask us to check our brains at the door, Your Excellency.
No. Absolutely. It's something like your knowledge of basic arithmetic. If somebody said to you 2 + 2 = 5, your intellect immediately says no. You see, it doesn't accept it.
Even if the person's wearing math teacher clothes
right?
and they're in a classroom.
And has a doctorate in mathematics, and he's the most famous person in all where of the West in mathematics. If he says 2 + 2 = 5, we call that the first principles of reason. That there is you might say, a rebellion of the mind against it. No, this is false. This can't be true because 2 + 2 = 4. The same thing is true with the faith. That there is a first principles of faith, you might say, certain things that you know to be absolutely true from faith, which is far greater even than reason. And when something contradicts it, immediately there's a reaction. You see, and that's what has happened since Vatican II. There are contradictions to our faith coming from this hierarchy that it poses as Catholic hierarchy, and so you have that, you might say, confusion. In other words, where these people are supposedly Catholic and they're telling me this, but the faith is higher than they, in the sense that we know the hierarchy through the faith. So and that's the question: what comes first, faith or apostolic authority? Faith comes first because apostolic authority through the faith. See, so the faith is a knowledge that comes ultimately from God. It is supernatural virtue. So when the hierarchy deviates from the faith, then the virtue is what tells you that this is wrong and must be rejected.
Okay. Jimmy Hunjin, 50 pounds. Thank you, Jimmy. I recently read in Yves Chiron's biography of Pope St. Pius X that German state professors were exempt from swearing the oath against modernism. Mr. Chiron, however, doesn't explain why. Does His Excellency know anything about this?
I know that's true, and I don't know why. That would have been, in my opinion, the first place where it should have been done, although it was not as rampant in Germany as it was in France and northern Italy. France was the worst place for modernism. So there were no prominent German modernists, so they may have said, it's not here, we don't need to do it.
Okay.
But I'm sure Pius X, knowing him, would not have exempted them unless there was some good reason for it.
Okay. There's your answer, Jimmy. Andrew McFarland for $10. Thank you, Andrew. Can you explain the origin and meaning of the Fleur-de-lis symbol outside of the French context?
Well, it came from a battle in France, or the origin where the French were victorious, probably over the English, their usual enemies, and as they charged from what I understand, the English, they ended up in a place where there were a lot of lilies, and that's how it became the symbol of the French monarchy. It also became a symbol of Our Blessed Lady, the Fleur-de-lis. The Fleur-de-lis, they say Fleur-de-lis in French. I don't know how that came about. Now, a lily is a symbol of purity, you see, so probably that's what it is, but very typically it is a symbol of Our Blessed Lady. Now, the French love that their national symbol is, of course, a symbol of Our Blessed Lady. That fits perfectly. So,
they would say it was planned that way, Your Excellency,
yes,
I'm
yes,
sure.
Yeah.
Teodoro Boggio, $2. Thank you, Teodoro. What is an amount that is good for tithing on a Sunday collection?
You should never ask a priest that.
Oh, well, he asked, so he's going to get the answer.
Well, the common, the ancient way, the Israelites did 10% of their income.
Etymology of the word, Your Excellency.
Yes, and tithing, and so the Levites were the ones that took care of the temple. They did not have any land. The other tribes had land, and so the other tribes had to contribute 10% to the Levites in order to support them. And that should be really 10% of your gross. So
if you make $100 a week, $10 would be something good to put into the basket.
Yes. But again, according to your means. Now, that could go either way. You might be living on a very low salary, and $10 or the 10% might really cut into survival. On the other hand, if you're making $100 million a year, that is known. I think you could contribute a little bit more.
Well, if you are making that kind of money, please be in contact with us. His Excellency would love to speak with you. He has some projects in mind.
you're supposed to give your excess to charity. That's you shouldn't just make money to buy fancy things and go on expensive vacation. There's a legitimate use of that, but you shouldn't. That should not be the only use of the excess of money. It should go to some, at least a portion of it, to some charity. You see, that's the teaching of the church.
So we should think about it like the water bill, electricity bill, tithe. It's all part of the same sort of thing.
Yes, but people who are of great means and who do well should be giving a greater proportion than people who are just making an ordinary salary.
And seriously, it's not just tithing on Sunday. There's other opportunities. They could contribute to the seminary, for example, or to...
Yes.
It shouldn't only be limited to Sundays. If a priest is performing a service for you, a baptism, a wedding, etc., just because it's not Sunday doesn't mean that you don't...
You wouldn't have any Sunday unless you had a seminary. You would have an empty church.
His Excellency's not subtle plug to help donate to the seminary.
Right.
So hope that answers your question, Teodoro. And a follow-up to that, $5. Thank you, Teodoro. What should be the daily attire of a layman, and is a jacket and tie required for Mass during the week or only on Sundays?
Well, it depends on your local priest. Is there a canon law? No. But there is decorum from tradition. Normally during the week, as I recall from my childhood, people would not put on a jacket and tie necessarily to go to Mass, but they would on Sundays. And you would get up in your Sunday best. There was something called Sunday best. You would have certain, shoes and certain things you would put on Sunday. Everybody did. And the women were very well dressed, and hats, and it was, everybody was all dressed up. You wouldn't think of going to Mass on Sunday not being dressed up, So that's it's a form of worship of God. It's a respect to God that you do that, and respect for the holy day of Sunday.
So if someone has to go to work in a uniform, Your Excellency, on a weekday, and he comes to Mass in that uniform, is it okay? Does he have to? He doesn't have to dress in a suit and tie?
No. Or a farmer, he can come in his farmer clothes, on weekdays. No, it would depend. Again, I don't want to make rules for everybody, but that was certainly the custom.
All right. Hope that answers your question. Thank you all for the super chats. I will do my best to keep up with it. You all are being very generous, and the Institute and His Excellency appreciate that. Jimmy Hunjan for £20. Thank you, Jimmy. I'm constantly checking Fleur-de-lis. I'm hoping that the St. Edmund Mission here in the UK will eventually raise enough to fit out a chapel with some of the treasures that they have.
Well, you'll need the treasures of Buckingham Palace in order to buy. Well, Fleur-de-lis is a wonder. I've done business with them. They're wonderful. They have magnificent things. They gather from all over Europe, but they're high priced. And so if you want to, as I said, you're going to need the treasure of the Incas in order to buy from Fleur-de-lis.
That was a favorite expression of Father Chicada's,
yes.
The Inca gold money.
Yeah.
Your Excellency, I would like to attend Sedevacantist masses in Germany, and often, unless they are from Sedeprivationist clergy who are hardly present there, one must verify whether the priestly ordinations or episcopal lineages are valid. Until now, I've always had to ask a priest individually about lineage. Are there any official lists or tables that show all the episcopal lineages that you have recognized as valid?
Not that I know of. And Germany is a bit of a desert for Sedevacantism. And I don't know who is circulating in Germany at all, really. So I couldn't answer that question.
Okay. So hopefully that answers your question. Teodoro, $5. Can a pope in normal times allow regular cremation? It has been argued that burial is too expensive, but is this true?
Well, cremation in itself is not it's not intrinsically evil, because even canon law permits it for times of plague or war. See, so yes, a pope could permit it for some serious reason. It is considered immoral for the reason that it is typically used by Freemasons and other people who don't believe in God as a way of defying God. You see, that I'll escape God by burning up my body. And that's the reason for but there could be a good reason, and the Pope could certainly dispense in that.
It would have to be a serious reason. Your Excellency, it couldn't just simply be an option. You can get buried or you can get cremated.
Well, the Pope can do whatever he wants. In other words, if somehow that relationship to defiance of God were removed from the notion of cremation, conceivably he could permit it. You see, but I don't see how you could ever remove that. That's, I think it would have to be a very exceptional thing where the exception overcame the problem. You see.
$3 Canadian maybe. Your Excellency, what's your favorite cheese? Much easier question.
Cheese, fromage. I don't know if I have one. I don't know. I don't think I have one.
Your
Camembert is very good. The
cheese gnostic.
I'm sort of cheese gnostic. Yes, the whatever they put out.
You'll have it Saint Nectaire, Pont l'Evêque.
Yeah, all of those. Yes, and then the cooked cheeses. What was that? What's the Dutch one? I can't remember the name of it now.
What the big one in the Netherlands is Gouda cheese.
Gouda, I think they call it. Yeah, Gouda cheese. I like Gouda cheese, but almost any of them I like. Very few I turn down.
The blue cheese as well, Your Excellency, like Bleu d'Auvergne or Stilton.
Yeah, I like those. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a pretty good survey there, APF. I hope you got value for money there. People in New Hampshire, Taos, New Mexico, Brooksville, Florida. You're familiar with that?
Yeah, I think I know people.
Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, California, Harrisburg, Ocala, San Diego, California, Sartell, Minnesota.
Never heard of that.
Teodoro Boggio, $10. Thank you, Teodoro. Whether personal or habitual intention, Novus Ordoers think past Aquinas philosophies can be used for the church like Aristotle. True?
I don't understand that question.
Post-Aquinas philosophies. I'm sorry, I read past. So systems after St. Thomas, systems of philosophy after St. Thomas. Could I use Kant, other people like that, adapted to Catholicism?
No. No. First of all, the church is not married to any one philosophical system. That's true. In other words, if you talk about systems. But it is married to common sense and accurate philosophy. And see, because it uses accurate philosophy in order to explain its dogmas in an analogical manner. See, and so your philosophy has to be correct. Otherwise, you can't use it. It's like using a rubber wrench, like a wrench that doesn't work because it's made out of rubber or something. It's a tool that has to work correctly. And the church has given its solemn approval to the Thomist system. St. Thomas is the one. And so in that sense, theologically, you are bound to use the Thomist or scholastic philosophy, and it was always required to teach that. Immanuel Kant is the devil, as far as I'm concerned. Anything it's hardly a word out of his mouth that is true. Everything is false. And other systems, they just don't even come close to the clarity of the Aristotelian Thomistic system, which is known as scholastic philosophy. And it is the philosophy of the church. Pius XI said it, Leo XIII said it, and many others.
So in a short answer, Teodoro, you can't use Kant.
Kant should be thrown in the trash. It should be shredded.
Too good for the trash.
He is the devil.
Speaking of cremation, we light it on fire and give it a proper burial.
Yeah.
Teodoro Boggio, $5. What is the best way to contact the Institute for Priestly Counsel, email or phone? Best time to contact Teodoro. That's very simple. If you just go to the Institute website and use the Contact Us form, email, let the clergy know what your challenge is, what your problem is, and let them know an email or phone and a good time to get you. Do not call here thinking there's not a priest waiting by the phone waiting to take your call to answer any question you might have. The clergy are very busy here. Connor, I did get your email. I'll be reading your questions soon, so thanks for asking about that. Pensacola, Arkansas, Phyllis Rampula, $20. Thank you, Phyllis. Your Excellency, do you have any counsel for a sedevacantist whose spouse is Novus Ordo? Items to share or videos to watch?
Ooh, that's a common problem where one is and one isn't, and yes, there's plenty of literature and videos available. It's just hard to. It's a hard conversion, you might say. People who are in the Novus Ordo see it as so radical and just against every grain in their body to say that man in Rome who's in a white cassock is not truly the Pope. It's very hard, and so they have to understand that. But they first have to understand what I always say. I always come back to this: is it continuity or rupture? Is Vatican II and its reforms continuity with the past or rupture with the past? That answers all of the other questions. If you try to address the other questions without addressing that question, you're just wandering around. You'll never get any place. That is the question. Is this the same religion as before Vatican II? And if the answer is yes, then we should all be there. If the answer is no, then none of us should be there.
Phyllis, if you look online for the London conference, His Excellency recorded something in December of 2013, and it's on True Restoration's YouTube channel. It's been viewed 70, 80,000 times now. And His Excellency goes to the heart of that argument that he just made, and he develops it across an hour or so to a captive audience of 4 at the time.
4 people.
but an audience of 80,000 since that time.
Yes,
so.
in a room that I paid £750 for, which at that time was a lot more than it is now.
Right. 10 Australian dollars from Moores. Will His Excellency make any comments on the ongoing online debate between Father Gabriel Lavery and Father Duterte? Is Father Lavery's critique on Bishop Gerard's supposed error regarding confessional jurisdiction valid?
Obviously, no, it isn't valid. No, it's we totally disagree with what he's saying, and Father Duterte and Bishop Gerard, I think, are totally accurate in what they're saying. So. But theological controversy, people have to get used to that. It's not the end of the world. It's not like Iran versus Israel. We're not. It's just that's the way you arrive at truth. Is people talking to each other, and they say, well, yeah, maybe I should consider this or that. You see, it's not. There's been theological controversy forever in the Catholic Church. They just haven't seen it. You see, with the internet and all of the media we have now, yeah, it's it's all over the place, and it's like watching the weather or the news, so they just have to get used to that and calm down a little bit. It's not a
people get very disturbed about it. Your Excellency.
No, they want to see, but there's a lot of controversy now because we're dealing with subjects that were not directly treated in the past. Nobody ever foresaw this problem, that you would have a defection in the papacy itself and a council that would break with the past. It was everyone would say in the past, that's impossible. It could never happen. God would never let it happen. So they never commented on it. So we have to go into these books and find certain principles that apply. You see? So, and that leads to certain controversy. And sometimes you might say, I don't know which side is right on this, but you still have the faith and you still can practice.
But you wouldn't extend that to conclavism, Your Excellency.
No, conclavism is absurd and very, very dangerous.
Why would you say dangerous, Your Excellency?
Because it would make the traditional movement look totally absurd and ridiculous. It would lead to more splits. It's that somebody decides, I'm going to be a pope, or is a few, priests that vote for him, or a couple of bishops that vote for him. I'm the pope. I mean, that's fantasy land, and then he starts making laws for everybody, and people just repudiate those laws, and then you're excommunicated. I mean, that would be the absurdity of it, and it would make the traditional movement look absurd.
So it doesn't solve the problem, really. It appears to solve the problem through some.
It would make a million more problems. That's what it would do.
All right, I hope that answers your question. Quebec City, Canada, Dendermonde, Belgium.
Dendermonde.
Auburn, Washington. Someone mentioned an aged pecorino or a triple cream brie.
I'm not familiar with either of those. Brie I've had.
Yes. Aged pecorino is in carbonara, Your Excellency. It's the cheese that you use to make a carbonara pasta. You probably had it before.
Right.
You've had plenty of meals in Italy, so I suspect you've had pecorino romano or aged pecorino. There was a clarification on the earlier question. The magisterium cannot provide doctrinal error, but can it make a pastoral error?
Not a pernicious one. In other words, not one that would lead you into error or lead you into, in other words, a doctrinal error, moral error. It could, there could be an error of prudence. For example, when a pope approved the Chinese missile in the 1600s, then it was later rescinded by another pope because it wasn't a good idea. That is not uncommon in the church, where one pope might do something and the other pope decides. The worker priest movement that Pius XII approved in France was very imprudent, and he rescinded it himself.
So there's an example of a pastoral error.
Yes, that's
Would that be attributed to the magisterium or a personal action of the Holy Father?
No, it's a prudence. In other words, how do we promulgate the faith, and how do we arrange the liturgy, etc. It cannot touch doctrine. Obviously, it cannot in any way thwart doctrine or teach something false. But it can be of greater or lesser prudence. And so there's a lot of examples of that.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking specifically of the ralliement, Your Excellency, the abandonment of the Cristeros. There are all sorts of problems that we can observe that are controversial in themselves. There are some people who think that the Holy Father said the ralliement, so we should support the Holy Father, and there were some Catholics who acted according to the ralliement.
Yeah, and also we have much better hindsight than the people at the time. So the idea was, we'll be nice to you, and so you should be nice to us. That was to the Third Republic, and that just blew up in Leo XIII's face, you might say. And there's even liturgical imprudences. Pius XII permitted, for example, the Germans to sing their masses in German, the Gloria, etc. He was opening up to vernacular in a number of places. He permitted experimental masses in France. So you see France in certain books, facing the people, etc. I would say those were imprudences.
And you talked about the Bea Salter more than once.
Bea Salter was an imprudence. That's a whole other world of. But no, in the history of the church, there's I'd have to go through it. But there have been imprudent pastoral decisions which are very clear from hindsight. I'm sure they meant well, and it probably seemed the right thing to do. But in hindsight, you can see that they were not the right thing to do.
Well, if you're just joining now, where there's a couple hundred of you watching, please feel free to hit the like button and type, if you haven't already done so, where you're watching from today. Welcome, obviously, to our live stream. I'm now going to read from Connor's questions. Connor had made a donation before the live stream and then sent his questions by email. What do the seminarian schedules look like on Saturdays?
They have chores in the morning, and then they have extended recreation on Saturday afternoon.
So, nothing academic?
No. No.
Do they have any spiritual direction during this time, Saturdays?
Saturday is either chores or whatever they're playing, tennis or hiking.
Mountain biking.
Yes, mountain biking.
Where the yeah. As you say, you're the Thomas Holm School of mountain biking, where the first rule is safety.
Safety, yes. Take the hard way down and crash and break your head. Yeah.
So pretty easy, Connor. Is it true that Pope Pius XII said that the Sanctus and Benedictus must be sung without a break? I've heard if it's in Gregorian, then it can't be split. But if not, it can be. I'm a bit confused.
Well, any book that I read is that they're split. Now, maybe some of the later reforms of Pius XII said differently, but all of the, you might say, traditional books say they are split.
Is it the that I think what he's
So
referring
up to, but not including the Benedictus, and then after the consecration, you sing the Benedictus.
Is that a tradition that when you grew up, Your Excellency, were you used to that in a sung mass that the Benedictus would only happen after the consecration?
I never noticed. I was pretty young at the time, but
14-year-old,
yes,
but Donald Sanborn noticed a lot of things.
Well, 14 was already the changes. And all,
Okay,
yeah.
so this would have been, I guess, when you were 6 or 7 or 8,
yes,
maybe.
you don't pay attention that much, but the Benedictus after the consecration is appropriate because blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. You see, so it's appropriate, but it's not something to have a fight over.
Okay. So it's not. So you don't think it was probably a decree? You haven't ever heard of something like that?
I never heard, but there were a lot of liturgical decrees after 1955 that we don't go along with because they were in view of the Bugnini reforms, and Bugnini was the author of all of those reforms.
And for those of you who are wondering who that is, His Excellency insists on the pronunciation of Bugnini as
Bugnini.
So that's the proper pronunciation in case you're wondering.
Well, that's the way it's spelled.
Is it true that a bishop who is not the ordinary must hold his crozier backwards?
No. It was in the 1920s, I think, that the Sacred Congregation of Rites said that any bishop who has the permission from the ordinary to use, like a visiting bishop who's not in a different diocese, ordinarily he can't use the crozier. But if the local ordinary in that diocese says you can use the crozier, then it's always held out, facing out.
Is there a discipline for sedevacantist bishops, Your Excellency?
No, but there's no hierarchy to say yes or no. So sedevacantist bishops typically use the crozier and they hold it out.
Okay.
Yes. Or they should.
They should hold it out. They should not hold it inverted.
Right.
Okay.
According to the Sacred Congregation of Rites.
Okay. Pretty authoritative congregation.
You can't get any higher than that.
Well, there's the Holy Father, but they're acting in the name of the Holy Father.
Oh, yeah, no, it doesn't go any higher than that.
Is His Excellency familiar with the supposed Eucharistic miracle of Buenos Aires in 1996? I'd like to hear his thoughts on these alleged Eucharistic miracles in the Novus Ordo. That's one of the objections I frequently hear from non-sedevacantists. Working backwards, Your Excellency, because an exorcist said this, or because there is a Eucharistic miracle in India, therefore the Novus Ordo is correct and sedevacantism is wrong. How's that for an argument?
Yeah, no. First of all, I know nothing about that event or supposed event in Buenos Aires. Secondly, a miracle must always be in confirmation of the truth. So if it is in confirmation of falsehood, it is not a true miracle. So the question is then, is the Novus Ordo true or false? So you're going backwards that way. You can't say, well, it's a confirmation of its truth. Protestants claim they claim miracles. Greek Orthodox claim miracles. Russian Orthodox claim miracles. It would be against the goodness and wisdom of God to permit true miracles that were not in confirmation of the truth.
I think that's a great answer, Your Excellency, in terms of if the Orthodox claim to have miracles too, does that make the Orthodox correct?
Yeah, no, it's going backwards. It has to be in confirmation of the truth.
All right. Men have forgotten God, 15 Australian dollars. Your Excellency, why do we pray world without end in the glory be? The word world in Catholicism normally refers to this earthly world, doesn't it? Who created this prayer?
I don't know. It is an odd way to say in saecula saeculorum. In saecula saeculorum means into the ages of the ages, and that's a Hebraism, to use that way of saying the ages of ages. And somehow or other in English, in the Old English, it came to be world without end. Saeculum also means world. You see, it means ages, an age or a world. So that might have something to do with it. But I never knew that. I always thought it was a little odd too. But it comes from the Douay Rheims and the older English. There's a lot of things there that might not make sense to us right now. The question, why do we adhere to it? Because those translations were very, very accurate, and so we adjust ourselves to those little, antiquarian expressions. There has never been a good English translation. Actually, the Douay should be updated, but all of the updates have been bad. And so we still use the Douay, which
It's not so very long ago.
So it's, well, it was revised. It was updated by Bishop Challoner in the 1750s. And so what we have now is the updated version from the 1750s, and it uses the English that they spoke at the time. So you just have to get used to it, but I really don't know the origin of that.
I like unto ages of ages, Your Excellency, that Hebraism, which basically is indicating that infinitude, what is it like to grasp eternity, ages of ages?
Yes, but world without end is bizarre, I would say, yes. I don't understand it.
But people shouldn't be disturbed about praying it.
No.
It's just a translation after all. Christus Vincit, $5. Thank you, Christus. Hello, Your Excellency. Are clergy permitted to make declarations on the validity of marriage in this day and age, even though they lack jurisdiction?
Do you mean annulments?
Declarations on the validity of marriage, I would think that's what he's referring to.
Well, no, they cannot. You need the jurisdiction of a bishop, of a diocese, in order to make those judgments. And we don't have that, and so we cannot do that. Nobody can do that because there's no jurisdiction.
So there's no secret board here for the Institute where marriages are dealt with?
No. I mean, even if you were convinced, and, I have seen cases over my 50 years where I would say, yes, this is an invalid marriage, no doubt. But I don't have the power to do that. I always use the example of a judge on a golf course talking to his friend, a judge. I think these people are as guilty as sin.
But then
that doesn't do anything. In court, he has to say that, and he has to enter it as the judge and with the power of the state. You see, but his just saying it or thinking it or it doesn't do anything.
Yeah, there's numerous times in which a judge has said somewhere off the record, I thought this person was guilty, but I had to rule innocent because of what was presented.
Yes. So the jury might say they're innocent, and and that's it.
So what have you had to tell those couples, Your Excellency, when you looked and you thought there's probably doubt here? They just have to live together as brother and sister?
Well, sometimes you leave people in good conscience. In other words, you don't say anything, because if you were to say, I think your marriage is invalid, and they go on,
they might take the opportunity to...
Well, they might split up, or they might not observe what is necessary for an invalid marriage. See, but I mean, that's case by case, you have to see everything, but there's certain cases where it's obvious, where there's a second marriage and they split up and they got married again to somebody else. And in that case, we say, you're not married, it's clear. But if it's a case where a judgment is involved, where somebody, the father-in-law put a gun to my head before the wedding and I really didn't want to marry, and that's a case that has to go to court.
So they couldn't simply convalidate it with you and say, we'd like to make sure our marriage is valid and
they could do that, but most of the time when people bring it up, it's because they want to split up.
Get out.
You see, and so
you have to exercise your best judgment.
That has to go to court, and the facts have to be proven by eyewitness and so forth.
And that would first be adjudicated in the diocese before it would be escalated anywhere else.
Well, it could be escalated to Rome, for appeals and all that. But it would takes place in an ecclesiastical court, and it's just like a civil court. There are witnesses, sworn witnesses. There's both sides, the prosecutor and the defender of the bond, and then they're cross-examined and
I think this person's crazy. I don't think this person's crazy.
It's a very slow process and a very exact process.
Watching from the Netherlands and Archdale, North Carolina. Damiano von Costas, $5. Good evening, Your Excellency. Can you tell us about the origin of your coat of arms and what made you choose the motto Sanctifica Eos in Veritate?
Well, the coat of arms is actually the Sanborn coat of arms. I looked that up. There is an organization called Sanborn Signatures that traces all of the Sanborns in this country and who they were in England, etc. And sure enough, they found the coat of arms in in a tavern in England, and they had a picture of it. So I copied that, and so that's what it is. So it's just the name. It doesn't have any religious significance. It's just the name. And Sanctifica Eos in Veritate, that's a quote from our Blessed Lord in the Last Supper. And I think that's what we're, the special emphasis on the truth versus all of the modernist falsehood. So we're sanctifying them in the truth. So I just thought it was an appropriate quote for somebody doing what I was doing.
Okay. Hope that answers your question, Damiano. Nikhil, the Pre-Vatican II Catholic Show, $7. Thank you. Just as I was about to read it, it refreshed. Give me one moment. Your Excellency, is a purely tacit will sufficient for conferring habitual jurisdiction, especially after the Pope's death?
Tacit will for conferring habitual jurisdiction? I don't understand that question.
I'll just repeat it.
Well, no, I got it the first time, but I don't understand it. I don't know what he's getting at.
All right, Nick, you might try rephrasing it, reframing it somehow in the chat, and I'll try to ask His Excellency again. Your Excellency, is your head all right? Someone is asking.
Yes, it's fine. He
did not get into a fight before.
No, I didn't get into a fight. This is Florida kissing me goodbye.
Okay.
Because I'm fair-skinned, and occasionally, before, about a year or so ago, I came up with some skin cancer, and so I see a skin cancer doctor every 6 months, and so whenever anything comes up, he tells me you got this or that. And so I did find something that was suspicious, and sure enough, it was it. And so he told me to put on this. He did a process for me to take care of it, but he said, I want you to take this for 30 days. You have to put this on for 30 days. And it purposely makes your head a mess. And of course, it occurred right at this time. People are going to say, well, what happened to you? It's not serious. It's nothing wrong. It's just Florida kissing me goodbye. The fair-skinned people should not go to Florida or live there a long time. I spent 17 years, and the sun there is of the same intensity as it is on the Sahara Desert. The latitude is the same. And so people don't realize that. The sun up here is of much lesser intensity. But, it takes a long time for it to develop, and so it's not to worry. It's just, it looks terrible, I know.
Columbus, Ohio. Another one from Jimmy. If a known first-time Novus Ordeite approaches the communion rail in one of the Institute's chapels and this person hasn't gone to confession, does the priest have the right to advise them not to receive? I suppose there's a couple caveats there, Your Excellency. I don't know that we would know, that the priest would know that someone is a known quote-unquote Novus Ordo, and the priest wouldn't also necessarily know that this person hasn't been to confession.
Well, there's a couple of things. The general rule is that if somebody approaches the communion rail in a pious manner, well-dressed and piously, that he is to receive communion. You see, that you don't refuse based on just a hunch or a...
Is that the practice of the Church, Your Excellency, or is that Institute
That's
policy?
canon law.
That's canon law.
So in the doubt, you would give someone communion. What we would do in that case, if we had a doubt about whether they're Novus Ordo or whether, even if we were certain they were, we would take them aside after Mass and say, you can't receive sacraments here until you abandon the Novus Ordo. And also we would have to process them. That means to make sure that their baptisms were correct. We would have them do a general confession because their confessions are probably invalid or very doubtful. And also they have to be instructed, at least in the rudiments of the Catholic faith. I mean, it is as if a non-Catholic is coming in, as if, you see. And so, but you don't do that at the communion rail. You see, you don't say, you're a Novus Ordeite and get out of here. Refusing communion at the communion rail has to be something that is very, very defined by law.
Serious reason.
Yes, and you have to be a public sinner, and everyone has to know you're a public sinner.
Immodest dress.
Immodest dress, or you're married and you're here with your girlfriend,
and everybody knows.
Your baby doll girlfriend, and everybody knows. And see, that would be reason as public sin. You see, but when somebody comes up, I mean, think of the big cathedrals even before the council, where, like St. Patrick's Cathedral, New York City, who might wander in?
Anyone could have shown up.
There's no control over that.
Many traditionalists take issue with Vatican II on Muslims worshiping the same God, but Vatican II apologists will say the same teaching was made in the Catechism of St. Pius X, that Muslims worship the one true
it's
God.
The same old.
You've heard this one before, Your Excellency.
Yes. We worship one God, not the same God. All right. And that's Gregory the Seventh said something like that to a sultan in Morocco, that we worship one God. And that's true. We worship one God, just as the Jews worship one God. And even some of the Greeks worshiped one God. That has nothing to do with the same God, you see. But this is the old thing that is dragged out all the time, and I've checked all of those references. It doesn't say the same God.
It says one.
One God.
So it's just a recognition that they're also monotheists.
Yes.
So the question is their God our God? Is it the same?
No, our God has a son. Their God does not have a son. So it's impossible that they be the same person.
Tomislav Ranchik. Your Excellency, what is the theological basis for Sedevacantism? Isn't it contradictory to the indefectibility of the papacy?
Well, I mean, where do we begin there? We
have a lot of new people on these streams.
Okay, no, the problem is that, again, is Vatican II continuity with the past, doctrinally, liturgically, in a disciplinary manner? Is it continuity or rupture? You can't even begin to talk about Sedevacantism until you talk about that. So we say it's rupture for various reasons, and that would take me about an hour and a half to explain all that. But if it is rupture, by the indefectibility of the church, it is impossible that come from a true Roman pontiff. So the doctrine, the dogma of indefectibility demands the conclusion that those Roman pontiffs or supposed Roman pontiffs who are promulgating this are not true Roman pontiffs. And that is, they might be elected, they are elected validly, but they don't have the power to rule the church, because they are showing an infallible sign that they are not truly, they don't have the authority from God.
So rather than a counter-argument, indefectibility is an argument for Sedevacantism.
Yes, indefectibility is an argument. Yeah, it is the argument. See, it's not a question of their personal heresy or whether they're heretics or not. That goes nowhere. And the problem is this rupture or continuity? If it's rupture, it cannot come from the authority of Christ. It is impossible. That would be a blasphemy to say that it comes from the authority of Christ, as if our Lord himself wanted us to betray the faith.
He has a follow-up. What's the advice for the bishop for those where the institute doesn't exist? Where do they go to confession and receive communion? Or see, with a last name like Ranchik, maybe Croatia, but I know Father Trauner goes to Croatia periodically. I want to say every couple of months. So if I'm guessing your location correctly by your last name, there is that. But if he's not happening to be in Croatia, Your Excellency, what would he do?
Well, we do.
Or in the Balkans.
We do. Well, we don't know exactly where he lives, right?
I'm guessing on the last name.
Okay, but we do long distance apostolate for people who are in that situation. I mean, Father Palma went to Japan for one family.
You were invited to go to Sochi on the last stream, Your Excellency.
I was invited to go to Sochi in Russia. I think I'll wait for a while. I liked Russia though when I was there, but Father Bear went to Hawaii for one family. And we do a lot of long distance things for, to at least, and other priests would do it too, if you're in Europe, or we would try to find out where you are and then the closest priest and see if we could arrange a visit.
All right, Tomislav, if you want to use the Contact Us form on the Institute, we'll try to connect you with a priest nearby you, not just where I'm guessing based on last names. Robert Zapp, $10. Can you please ask His Excellency what his favorite wine is? Or in his opinion, the most notable wine and why? Greetings from St. Mary's in the heart of the beast there in Kansas, Your Excellency.
Favorite wine? Oh, well, I like all wines. I mean, it's favorite one. I would say probably one of the French Bordeaux's. I mean, it's definitely be France.
Châteauneuf-du-Pape.
Châteauneuf-du-Pape is very good.
From Provence.
For the Burgundies, they're dreadfully expensive, though. I mean, he shouldn't even think about. But any the full-bodied Burgundy, Bordeaux's are excellent. I mean, France is going to produce the best wines. It's hands down.
I can hear the Italians and the Spanish already upset, Your Excellency.
And the California, oh, no. But it is true, and especially dollar for dollar. There's what you would pay for a California of the same quality is far more than what you would pay for a French wine. Anyway, that's probably my favorite, but who can afford that?
Okay.
So,
just a note, Robert, if you want to treat yourself or if you want to treat His Excellency, those are the recommendations. Morris, $5 Australian. What are your opinion on English? Thank you, Morris. What are your opinion on English Thomistic philosophy manuals by Grenier, Glenn, Mercier, Nolden? Any good reasons for a layman to study Thomistic philosophy?
Well, that's a lot of questions. Let's take those one by one. Grenier is very, very good.
Glenn
is very, very good. He's simpler and shorter, but he's accurate and good.
Mercier
should be avoided because he was of the opinion that you could marry St. Thomas with Kant. So
and we already know what you think of Kant.
Yes, Kant is a devil.
You can't Kant.
Yes, so Mercier should be avoided. And who was the last one?
Nolden?
Nolden never wrote a philosophy. He was a moral theologian.
Okay. And on moral theology?
I would never use him.
Why?
He permits everything.
Okay. That's His Excellency's judgment on that. He has a follow-up. Do you have some favorite psalms or books of scripture?
Oh gosh. Favorite psalms. Well, there's the Miserere of them. Psalm 50. Yes, I mean there's some beautiful psalms. But I can't think of one off the top of my head. Favorite book of sacred scripture? I think St. John's Gospel has to be the favorite.
And why is that, Your Excellency?
Well, it's seeing. He wrote it to prove the divinity of Christ to the naysayers at the time, and he shows, you might say, Christ in such a vivid way. The others recounted things that Christ said and did, but the conversations that Christ had and it's more vivid.
Is there an example you're thinking of, Your Excellency?
Oh, the top of my head.
Because I think of St. John more philosophically. I think of the last gospel and that richness there when you say the darkness did not comprehend the light. I mean, there's 5 or 6 different ways you can think about how the darkness didn't comprehend the light. So I tend to think of St. John as more philosophical. So it's interesting that you're thinking about it in more of a narrative frame or how our Lord interacted.
Well, the conversation with Pilate is the most explicit and complete in St. John.
Okay.
And that is it's almost you're there.
You'd want to be in that.
Yes, it's
quid est veritas.
The other St. Luke is known for summarizing.
I expect no less from a doctor, Your Excellency.
And he was not an eyewitness either. See, St. John, you can tell is speaking from his memory, and or else things that our Lord related to him directly. And so I would say probably the Gospel of St. John.
Is it, my understanding, Your Excellency, St. Luke is writing from Our Lady's testimony, St. Mark is writing from St. Peter's testimony,
yes.
And Matthew and John are writing
yes.
from their own experiences.
Yes.
Okay. $10 from A. Smith. Thank you, $10. Thank you, A. Smith. If you have a question, please put it in the description.
You can see what's on your mind.
Hey, what can I say? You could please put your question in the description if you forgot to do that, A. Another $2 from Moore's, Australian dollars. Is the spirit of Opus Dei and its founder good?
No. But I'm not an expert on. I just know that's the answer to the question. But no, it's not good.
You haven't looked too much into it, Your Excellency.
I've heard a lot of things about it, but I never did a study of it or anything like that. It doesn't affect me that much.
Okay. Bob Mayer, $50. Thank you,
Meyer.
Bob. Meyer, sorry. Bob Meyer, $50. Thank you, Bob. From my wife. Please explain invincible ignorance and how it applies in a situation where in the wake of Vatican II, children received such poor formation in the faith that they don't know how to practice it correctly.
Well, invincible ignorance is ignorance that is not your own fault. That is, that it would require an effort beyond your ability to, how would you say, alleviate the ignorance. So there's no way in your case. So that can vary from person to person. What is invincible in one person could be vincible in another. I'd give an example of invincible ignorance is a doctor who's at the operating table and he says, one of these legs has to come off. I don't know which one it is. Oh, I'll take the left one off. See, he could have easily found out which one should come off. And then the lady or the man has no legs after a while, because he took the wrong leg off. But even if he took the right one off, see, he would commit a sin because he was not informed. You see, that's invincible ignorance, where you should know and you have the means to find out. Invincible is that, well, yes, you should know, but you don't have the sufficient means to find out. And so whatever it is, could be anything. You see, so. That's known as invincible ignorance, and it's rather common. And in religious matters, it's very common. You could see invincible ignorance with regard to the Novus Ordo, something I explained earlier, that people say, well, this is the Catholic Church, and this is what happens in the Catholic Church, and that's as far as they go with it. And but we can't judge. We can't get into somebody's mind to say it's invincible or invincible.
In the frame he gives, Your Excellency, maybe could we say that a child could have invincible ignorance when he was 5, 6, 7, being raised by his parents, but by the time you get to age of reason and you can see what's happening in the church, then that probably transitions to some kind of invincible ignorance about what's going on in the church.
It could. Again, only God knows. You see, but it would become invincible if you noticed a difference between the church of the past and the church of today. As if you did some research and you say, well, this was the way the church acted and church taught, and
no balloons, no banners,
right, and various other things, doctrine, and if you get to that point and you do nothing, then you are guilty. See.
But we can't know inside.
Only God knows.
Only God knows.
And you can have a hunch, but only God knows.
To the German question earlier, Your Excellency, Lena, I'm not. Should I attempt this Belgian last name? Good Gesellschaft says that Father Steenbergen has a mission in Germany.
Oh, he does. Yes, I just know that there's certain countries that are very strong in the traditional movement, and then also strong in Sedevacantism, and some that are not. And Germany was always a place they never heard much from, and I don't think there's.
Have we had a German seminarian before?
Yes, we had, but I think we had 2, but they both left of their own accord. They decided they didn't have vocations. But I'm not really familiar either with Germany, as far as what's going on in Germany. So I'm not really an authority on that at all.
All right. Pre-Vatican II Catholic Show for $7 Singaporean. Thank you, Nikhil. Your Excellency, can formerly scandalous music be purified for modern use? For example, the waltz was considered scandalous in the 19th century.
Well, dancing the waltz was considered scandalous. See, up to that time, you had dances that they didn't touch each other. See, like the minuet, which was the 18th century, they would stand at about 10 feet apart, and they would look at each other and sort of dance around in front of each other, but they never touched, or as at most they might hold a hand or something. But
they both had gloves on, usually too, for that kind of dancing.
There was none of this business where they were up against each other, you see. But the waltz introduced that in the 19th century, and then the foxtrot and all of the other dances did that, and they were considered occasions of sin. Yes. Now the waltz as music, though, is just the 4/4 time. You could listen to Strauss waltzes and various others.
Well, I'm imagining it playing in a traditional Catholic house, Your Excellency, but children might be moving around. It is dancing music, and they might imagine themselves with a dance partner.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think it's something. It's too bad that dances have descended into that category, But it's certainly the waltz. I don't think is anything near as bad as something that you would have today. I mean,
like the tango or something.
The tango is that is absolutely filthy.
A favorite of Bergoglio.
Yeah,
I think.
yeah, Bergoglio's tango. Yeah,
of infelicitous memory. Tommy Lee, 10 pounds. Tommy, I asked this question already of His Excellency, but I'll just repeat it. Are we right to accuse Vatican II of heresy for saying Muslims worship the one true God? Vatican II apologists argue that the Catechism of St. Pius X espoused the same thing. I think His Excellency answered that question already.
One God. That's what the Catechism says. And yes, that's a heresy to say that they worship the one true God. That's false. They worship a false God. He might be one, but he's false.
Another clarifying question, Your Excellency, probably, again, we have a lot of new people on the stream. Welcome. If you are coming to the stream or you've just come on in the last few minutes, please hit the like button, and it helps get the stream out to more people. And please let us know in the chat where you are watching from today. Your Excellency, I know you've explained this before, but can you explain the difference between Sedeprivationism and Sedevacantism? Explain it like I'm a smart 8th grader. So 14 years old, so I suppose a young Donald Sanborn.
Well, let's see, where do I begin? Authority has two aspects to it. One is designation, and the other one is the actual power to rule. See, and that is Thomist philosophy concerning authority, and that's a certitude. So, for example, you see it in the President of the United States. He is designated in November, but he receives the power to rule, to be president in January. And before that, it was done in March. It'd be,
Used to be longer.
Yes, much longer. So he would be a president-elect. That is, he's not a common citizen, but at the same time, he doesn't have the power to rule or to have any of the executive power. So that is just commonly accepted. And so the Sedeprivationism is saying, well, he's validly elected, but he doesn't have the power to rule for the fact that he intends to impose a false religion upon the Catholic Church. Going back to the example of the President of the United States, he must swear to uphold the Constitution. He does that in front of everybody. You see, that means that he intends what what is necessary for the good government of the United States. In other words, that's the idea. If he said, no, take that thing away, I'm not swearing to anything, and I'm just going to be whatever I please, he would not become the President of the United States. But he would still be the president-elect until the Congress removed it from him. See, so that's the same thing here, is that you have these elected people that don't have the power, but nonetheless remain elected. And inasmuch as they're elected, they continue the apostolic chain. That is the succession from St. Peter the Apostle. They are selected to be popes, but they don't become popes. So, but the essence there is that they have the election in order to continue the lineage. You see, just as the same thing would be true of the President of the United States.
Well, we've been asked. I say we, Your Excellency, sorry, you've been asked questions at forums where I have been present, and people try to use the same reasoning to apply to the head of state for their country. So let's say, for example, Macron had, by his actions, he is showing that he does not want to uphold the law of France. Therefore, can we consider him an illegitimate ruler? President Trump may have taken an oath, but his actions show that he is undermining the country. Can we reject him? Effectively applying Sedevacantism in the secular order, Your Excellency, is there?
Well, the demands of the secular order are far, far less than the demands of the Catholic order, because you have to have an absolute continuity with the past, doctrinally and discipline and everything else, anything that pertains to the essence of the church, an absolute continuity. Has to be a straight line, whereas that's not true of politics. And it is generally conceded by philosophers, Catholic philosophers, that if you are seeing to the common peace of the nation, in other words, the common functioning of the nation, that you are qualifying as a legitimate ruler.
Even if you're Stalin or Tito or...
Yes,
now.
and that's the history of the Catholic Church. I mean, it regarded the Roman emperors, the persecutors of the church, as true rulers. There's then you have the problem of who's to say, and the church never will encourage revolution. I mean, the history of the church has been always to recognize rulers. The church even recognized Hitler as a ruler. He was
legitimately elected.
The Freemasonic presidents of France, and they were considered legitimate rulers. You name it. I mean, I can't think of a single case where the church would say that's illegitimate. Possibly Stalin, possibly the communist system, because the system in itself is abusive. You see, but I don't think Pius XI ever said Stalin is not a true ruler. I don't think he ever said that. See, so, but my kingdom is not of this world, and that's why the church stays out of those things. But
it's been a long time since Queen Elizabeth and the church getting involved in.
Yes, and that is where you had the Catholic faith established in England, and she was persecuting it. That was, and therefore she was excommunicated. And
could you say he was declaring Sedevacantism regarding the throne in England?
Well, again, the old rule was if the Pope excommunicated you, then all of your oaths to the monarch were dissolved. So, but that sort of fell into desuetude by that time. So, did it have that effect? I don't know. So,
short answer, Your Excellency, the bar for the church is much higher.
Much higher.
And the bar for the world is much lower.
Much lower, yes. So, I mean, yes, possible you could make an argument, but in the practical order, it doesn't matter. But in the practical order in the Catholic Church, it matters a great deal.
So going back to that smart eighth grader, Your Excellency, designation versus authority.
Yes, and then the Totalists are saying, their argument is he's a public heretic, but public heretics are not Catholics, therefore he can't be the Pope in any way. He can't be validly elected. We answer that heresy only has juridical effect when it is declared. So I can't say, you are a heretic and therefore, you get out of here, or I can't just make an accusation of heresy without a legitimate authority. See, it only has juridical effect if authority declares it.
So Luther was technically a priest in good standing for some years?
Yes, from 1517 to 1521. And Nestorius actually retained his see. He promulgated his heresy on Christmas Day of 428. He retained his see until 431, and when he arrived at the Council of Ephesus, he was given the honors of being the Bishop of Constantinople. See, that shows the juridical effect. In other words, until the church comes down on you juridically, all of your juridical privileges, etc., are still there. You see, so that's why we reject totalist Sedevacantism, because it just doesn't work. It doesn't hold up to the law.
So the follow-up to that, to our smart eighth grader.
Smart eighth grader, yeah.
According to the thesis, is Leo XIV legally the Pope? He's just lacking the authority to speak on church matters?
He's legally elected.
Legally elected. And he lacks the authority to speak on church matters?
Yes, he lacks the authority to teach, rule, and sanctify the Catholic Church, yes.
Would his cardinals be valid?
They would be valid as electors. That's the key to the whole thing. And really, that's why cardinals are made, as electors.
And to pay for the upkeep of the churches in Rome.
Yes.
Morris, $10 Australian. Thank you, Morris. How to distinguish between psychological and moral problems? Do priests get trained to counsel psychological problems of the faithful? Would you say the modern world has substituted the confessional for therapy? I think he means to say has substituted therapy for the confessional.
Let's take those one at a time.
How do you distinguish between psychological and moral problems?
Well, a psychological problem is really a disease of the brain. A disorder of the brain might be better than disease. Excessive fear, like paranoia.
Thinking I should be a different gender.
Yeah, or all sorts of, it's something. Well, that's a little different. I don't think that, but the
that wouldn't be a psychological problem, Your Excellency.
That is a sexual disorder. In other words, and it's mysterious, So, but it's not really psychological.
Okay.
I wouldn't call it psychological. In other words, you could have a perfectly sane person who thinks that. You see, and paranoia, schizophrenia, these are disorders of the brain, whereby the brain feeds to the intellect, which is not subject to any kind of problem, because it's spiritual. Feeds to the intellect false information. So you're against me. So you're trying to hurt me, See, and there's no basis for that to say that, So that's an excessive fear, because emotions are in the brain. See, and or various other things, or hallucinations where the imagination is too strong and they think things because they have experiences in their brain, almost like a dream, that just don't exist. That's schizophrenia. So yes, priests have to be aware of those things. They are not psychologists or psychiatrists, but they should be aware of the various forms of psychological disorders, because many people think that their their psychological problems are spiritual problems, and they come to priests thinking, I have a spiritual problem, when in fact they have a psychological problem. And so the priest has to say, you need to see a psychiatrist instead of coming to me, because your problems are not.
So that's the second question. Do priests get trained to counsel psychological problems?
No, they would just know when they see one. In other words, they should know this is paranoia, this is schizophrenia, this is something else,
So you would tell
bipolar.
maybe someone to go see a therapist, Your Excellency, about a problem?
If I knew that the therapist would give them correct, some
Guidance.
therapists would
Sure.
prescribe things that are awful. But if I knew somebody that could be trusted, so they have to have a basic knowledge of how to determine those things, but they would not in any way try to be a doctor or a psychologist. No.
His last statement, I think Fulton Sheen has said this before, Your Excellency, that the modern world has substituted therapy for confession.
Yes, and that's the danger of psychiatrists and psychologists, that they will get into your spiritual life, and they will tell you to do things that are contrary to your spiritual good. See, that's the danger.
Ross Clay, 50 Australian dollars. Your Excellency, the question I would like to ask is, what is the best argument for capital punishment, such as the death penalty for heinous crimes? Here in Wagga, Australia, and I don't know if he means Wangaratta, but if he does, a magistrate told me that it ended in the 1950s because it is barbaric.
No, it's not barbaric. No, the church has perpetually taught that it is, and it's in sacred scripture too, St. Paul, that it is a legitimate thing to do, that society has the power, because God gives the authority of society is from God, and society has the power to remove, even by death, persons who have committed crimes that are worthy of that punishment. It has been observed by all societies in the history of the world, and Christian societies, and it's only a recent thing where people do not regard the government as having the authority from God, and so it is a deterrent to crimes, and one of the reasons for all the crimes that we have now is that they're not using them.
So if you only had to make one argument for capital punishment, Your Excellency, would you say it was deterrence in the natural order, not a supernatural argument?
No. In other words, it's legitimate first because of the power of the state, and secondly, it is a deterrent. It is. Why do people fear it so much and want to get out of it? Don't give me the death penalty. I'll plead guilty, and I'll be exempt from the death penalty. So, it is a very thing that inspires a lot of fear.
Yeah, I remember a death row inmate saying he believed in hanging, just not in his case.
Yeah. Yes.
Tucson, Arizona, Fargo, North Dakota, London, a campground in Indiana, Guntucky, Martinez, California, Ecuador, Imperial Valley, California. For those who are just coming onto the stream now, please consider hitting the like button. It helps push the video out to other places. If you missed the very beginning of the stream, I alluded to the fact that we're about a week, a little bit more than a week away from ordinations and His Excellency's Jubilee. And if you're interested in contributing to the Chalice Fund for the two deacons, one has almost hit his goal and the other one is almost there. It's not here in the YouTube stream, so if you're interested in contributing, go to MHT Seminary, use the Contact Us form, and we'll put you in contact with one of those deacons. Also, Your Excellency, we recently had some testimonials from the France trip that Father Bayer went on, and people were favorably, they were impressed with it. There are more coming up. Father Saavedra is leading a trip to Mexico City in November, and Father Desay is leading a trip to Rome next year, and Father Bayer has a trip to New Mexico around New Year's Eve, the first of the year. It's mostly because you're retired, Your Excellency. You're not going to be. You were retired after the peanut butter and jelly fiasco in '83 or '84, infamous peanut butter and jelly
84.
scenario. And so, since you're not leading these groups anymore, other priests have to step up and take charge.
Yes, and I don't think I could keep up either with young people as far as I used to do that, but walking Rome 10 or 15 miles a day, which you would do. I don't know if I'm up to that right now.
Well, if you're interested in joining any of the clergy on those trips, if you go to ihsevents.org, you'll see those links to Mexico, New Mexico, and Rome. Next question, we've got donations, $200 from Melody Jennings. Thank you, Melody. And £2 from Jimmy Hunjin. Thank you, Jimmy. If either Melody or Jimmy have questions, please put those in the chat. Jimmy says, for £10, I think an exemption to cremation could be made for the documents of Vatican II.
Well, that's what I always say. I mean, if elected Pope, the first thing I would do is get the big, beautiful leather-bound books. I'm sure they have those documents in the Vatican. And in solemn procession in St. Peter's Basilica, throw them into a bonfire and then sing a Te Deum. That's what needs to be done. Vatican II is the problem, and it has to go. It has to be flushed down the toilet, you might say. Any kind of fixing Vatican II or conservatism and it's just all nonsense. That's the problem. That's the poison, and we have to get rid of the poison.
Well, Your Excellency, I mean, I've heard that Leo is reciting the Our Father in Latin. Aren't you excited?
Yeah, I'm all excited. No, he's. I think he's a Francis man that doesn't have the crudeness of Francis. He's smooth and he's everything out of his mouth is platitudes and niceties and dialogue and encounter and it's all social gospel. I haven't heard him say anything about the faith yet. It's all social gospel. The faith for them is some sort of interior feeling about God. It's modernism. That's faith for them. But he doesn't talk about Catholic dogma or anything like that. It's all making the world a better place in which to live in peace. And, as if, he calls up Putin and, we need peace. Come on. You think that people are going to throw down their arms because Leo says we need to have peace? It's a bit childish, and peace is something very hard to negotiate. And if you can even negotiate it, so... he's I don't like him. Who
knew? If you're interested in His Excellency's thoughts on Leo, if you just search Leo Watch in YouTube, you'll find first episode. With only 3 weeks in the non-pontificate, His Excellency had lots to say about what Prevost had to say.
I mean, he hasn't reversed any act of Francis. Not a single thing. All of those horrible things that Francis said and did, both saying and in document, he hasn't reversed any of them. He's told us he's in heaven, looking down upon us. He said that twice. This man that was a blatant heretic, worse than Luther, and he's in heaven. So he's all confused and everything. But I say he's different from the others in the sense that this is Catholicism for him. He never knew the traditional faith. He went to all of those seminaries, all that place in Chicago and everything, and just went through the whole system. This is Catholicism for him. So in a way, it's quite different. He's incapable, I think, of saying anything Catholic.
Kevin Phillips, $10. Thank you, Kevin. If you have a question, please put it in the chat. Will Matthews, $5. Thank you, Will. Does Bishop Sanborn run MHT the same way he ran St. Thomas Aquinas Seminary before the 9 left?
Pretty much the same. I mean, there's always refinements of the rule every year.
Any big changes you can think of?
No, nothing really big. I mean,
Are you saying you're consistent, Your Excellency?
I'm pretty consistent, yeah. I never change.
So the Father Sanborn of the 80s is quite similar to the Bishop Sanborn of the 2020s?
Well, hopefully I've improved, But, no, I would say, I learned a lot, and with time you get experience and you do things differently.
What about course load for students or recreation or different policies?
I think our course load is more demanding now
than it was in Ridgefield?
Yes.
Why?
As I thought that more things needed to be taught to the seminarians now through, after Vatican II than before Vatican II. You just think that, well, it's they need to know more, for one thing. And also, Archbishop Lefebvre was never big on academics.
Okay.
He thought that if the priest knew the basics and knew how to say Mass and give the sacraments, so he was sort of down on heavy academics. And so...
But back in the 80s, did people know how to read and write still, Your Excellency?
They did, yes.
So you didn't have to do so much of that.
No, now they don't know how to write. Most people coming in, unless they've been well schooled, cannot write cursive. They write in this odd printing. It's very...
And just expressing themselves in an essay form.
Yes, their spelling is abominable.
So some of that has obviously changed and morphed over time.
Yes.
And soccer has been banned periodically from recreation.
It's banned forever.
It's currently banned forever. There is a petition circulating, I'm sure. A Christian Ingham is watching from Most Holy Trinity Seminary in Reading, Pennsylvania. That's interesting.
All right.
Greenfield, Wisconsin, Tasmania, Australia, Lethbridge, Alberta.
Been to Lethbridge.
Kevin's follow-up is, what is the difference between the SSPV and the Roman Catholic Institute?
Oh, gosh. That would take me a long time to...
The express answer, Your Excellency. The 2-minute drill.
Well, for one thing, one problem is we don't know a lot about them because they're very silent and they really don't...
Well, they're not silent about you. I think Father Sanborn is how you're referred to.
Yes, but I mean, as far as their positions and all, I mean, I can't really speak for them because if I can go from what I knew about them in the past, they're opinionists about whether Leo would be the Pope or not.
That's up to you.
It's up to you. It's a matter of opinion, and it's a legitimate opinion to say he isn't.
Who are you to judge?
That was then Father Kelly's point, was that it's a legitimate theological opinion, and so we would differ a great deal on that.
I think praxis-wise, Your Excellency, Bishop Dolan referred to them as the Republican Party at prayer. Do you feel that that's justified?
I don't know what he meant by that.
But the idea that there's a lot of gung-ho America.
Oh, there is. Well, Bishop Kelly was originally a Bircher, and he left it at the request of Archbishop Lefebvre.
Okay.
He quit it. But it was always in his heart.
What is a Bircher for the non-Americans who are watching?
John Birch Society that would extol, first of all, they're very anti-communist, and I absolutely support them on that. And but they extol the American system as the ideal system of government, and just like the
greatest thing
best
ever.
thing that ever happened to government. I would disagree with them on that. Religious liberty and all of the other things that are wrong with the government, even the Constitution, etc. But yeah, they're very patriotic, which is good, and so there's Bishop Kelly. I had many discussions with him about that very point, and they got very hot. And but he was very much a supporter of the whole American system, and I'm not.
That's really too bad.
Yeah.
Alexander Peterson, $10. Thank you, Alexander. What value is to be gained from the political views of Bio regarding his support of the third position and intransigence in the face of democratism, liberalism, and communism? Gary Gu was the same.
That's a big question. Give it to me again.
What value is to be gained from the political views of Bio regarding his support of the third position and intransigence?
The third position. I don't understand that.
Third way, Your Excellency, sometimes there's a discussion about alternative systems. Instead of capitalism versus socialism or capitalism versus communism, a third way could be found between those systems. I'm guessing when he says third position, that's what I'm thinking he means.
Well, it needs to be cleared up. But let me take that first. Yes, the church is neither capitalist nor communist. It's neither liberal capitalist nor communist. Obviously, I'm bowls down the middle. I don't like to say that, but there are certain very serious problems with both positions.
and Leo the 13th addressed those, and but that's I don't think Bio ever addressed that, and I don't think Garrigou ever addressed it. I mean, I'm fairly familiar with their works. I never saw them address that. So let's go on to the next one.
Intransigence in the face of democratism, liberalism, and communism.
Well, yes, they were both very intransigent on all of those issues, and yes. I
So the value to
them.
be gained would be to read their works.
Yes, they're excellent works. Yes.
Jimmy Hunjin, £5. Thank you, Jimmy. Would there be an argument from Epikeia for undertaking a solemn exorcism?
You can't do a solemn exorcism without the permission of the local bishop. No, I would not do that.
All right. Angela Lincoln, 20 Australian dollars. Thank you, Angela. If you have a question, please put it in the chat. Teodoro Boggio, $10. Have you heard of Dom Lanford's response to the Ottaviani intervention? The Novus Ordo tries to justify the new theology of the Eucharist if the true doctrine is also said in the general instruction, the Roman Missal for the Novus Ordo.
That's a bit of a confused question.
All right, so let's start with the first one. Had you heard of Dom Lanford's response to the Ottaviani intervention?
No.
The Novus Ordo tries to justify the new theology of the Eucharist as if the true doctrine is also said in the general instruction.
Well, there's two general instructions. There's the one that came out first in 1970, which has the heretical definition of the Mass. And then there was objection to it. So then another one came out, I think in 1971. And then
the original one said the Mass is the Lord's Supper.
Well, it's the congregation of the people that for the purpose of commemorating Christ's, Last Supper. So I mean, straight out of Martin Luther. And so then they changed it to something orthodox, but they didn't change anything else in the missal. And Father Cicada was very clear on pointing that out. And so it is a Protestant service that is, has Catholic icing on it.
Watching from East Setauket, is that how you say that?
Setauket, yes, Long Island.
East Setauket, it sounds probably familiar.
Yes.
Grounds for you. The Bronx.
Very familiar, yes.
I say the Bronx.
Yeah, the Bronx.
The Bronx. Oxford, UK. A little different from
Oxford. You can't get better than an Oxford accent. That's the best in the world.
Giselle Demers, 20 Canadian dollars. Thank you, Giselle. If you have a question, please put it in the chat. Jimmy Hunjin, £5 to let you know, Your Excellency, Irishmen should always be sheltered from the sun. So
be
careful about those Florida visits.
3/4 Irish, so yes, I know. Well, I didn't go to Florida because I wanted to.
Where's Wally for 40 Australian dollars from Sydney, Australia? Thank you, Wally. Do you know about the conspiracy of the Schofield or Darby Bible being mass-produced in the early 1900s to get Protestants sympathetic to the Balfour Declaration and Israel obtaining its own state in the Middle East?
I never heard of any of those things.
You know about the Schofield Bible, Your Excellency?
No, I never heard of it.
Okay. So there's your answer, Where's Wally? It has been heard, but His Excellency is not familiar with it. Southern Indiana. Ali Moore, 100 Brazilian reals. Thank you, Ale. What is the state of the Novus Ordo? If Leo XIV rejected Vatican II and all the heresies post-1960, would they be part of the church again and him the true pope? Is it then materially the church, but not formally?
Well, let's take the first one. Yes, he would become the pope if he did that. All right. He's in the position to become the pope. When you say the church, they have not founded a new church. They have, I would say, hijacked the institutions of the Catholic Church in order to promulgate their heresy, but you still have the structure of the Catholic Church that they have not altered. So it's not a question of a new church and an old church or anything like that.
He's applying the material formal to the church, Your Excellency. He says, is it materially the church, but not formally?
Yes, you could say that. In other words, that the structures of the church are still there, but it is not formally the church. I'd have to think about that before I'd give a definitive answer.
Okay. My father chose to be cremated because he wanted to be buried in the same tomb as my little 2-year-old brother. He also imposed it on my mother. What is the moral approach to this?
Well, in the Novus Ordo, you can get cremated for no reason at all. So if they were Novus Ordites, I can't say anything about it, but you would be a mortal sin to do that otherwise.
Do you have any opinions on chess?
I was never good at it. I used to like to play it, but I always lost.
That's surprising, Your Excellency. It's very much a brain game, so I would have figured you would have liked it.
Well, I think you need a math brain, and I don't have a math brain. I think
it's all about permutations and variations.
Yes, so I liked it, but I always lost.
Well, the best players are always, I think, playing 4, 6, 8 hours a day, and I can't imagine you playing chess 4, 6, 8 hours a day, Your Excellency.
No.
Colby Dawson, $50. Colby is in the Louisiana mission. Thank you, Colby. If you have a question, please put it in the chat. 20 pounds from Tommy Lee. Your Excellency, thank you for answering my question. Regards from the UK. Bishop Selway will be visiting soon, doing confirmations.
Right.
So plenty to study there. Confirmandi. Pre-Vatican II Catholic show, 7 Singapore dollars. Thank you, Nikhil. Your Excellency, what's the best way to self-study Latin as a layman?
There are some good ecclesiastical Latin books. I would not get into the classical Latin. They are the same language, but there are...
You don't like Wheelock, for example?
That's classical Latin. The style is different. Some vocabulary is different. I think the more practical would be liturgical Latin. And I can't think of them. That's Scanlon, I think. It's some book. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but there are some liturgical Latin books.
Okay. Did you ever use Our Latin Heritage books, Your Excellency?
Never heard of them.
Okay. Those are some of the ones that I had.
But you could study the classical Latin too. That's good. I mean, it's the same language. It's just style is different,
and you can listen to the priests if you want to hear pronunciation.
Yeah, the pronunciation, the ecclesiastical pronunciation is quite different from the classical pronunciation.
Well, and then there's the controversy about italic pronunciation, Your Excellency, versus...
No controversy about it.
No controversy for His Excellency, as you can see.
No, Pius X said everyone had to use the Italian pronunciation.
But there was obviously a variation in that prior to that time.
Yes. Dominus vobiscum. That was the way they would say it in France.
It is still said in some ways in that way, Your Excellency.
I know. And
it doesn't sound unfamiliar.
Agnus Dei vitalis peccata mundi. That was Germany. Cavi, talis. Yeah. It's standardized Italian.
Right.
Gloria in excelsis Deo. That was German.
Yeah. Yes, there's all sorts of examples there. A further question based on my earlier one from Christus Vinci, $10. Thank you, Christus. If a lapsed Catholic marries outside the church, can that be declared invalid today by the clergy, or does lack of jurisdiction prevent them from declaring or judging that?
Lapsed Catholic, if you are a baptized Catholic, and we consider those who are baptized in the Novus Ordo as baptized Catholics, if they go to someone who doesn't have, if they contract a marriage that is not a Catholic marriage, then it's invalid.
They're not eligible to contract a marriage outside the church.
No.
Okay, so that doesn't take jurisdiction to make that judgment, Your Excellency?
No. Well, actually, that's a little disputed right now. But I wouldn't want to get into that.
Okay, so Christus, if this is not a theoretical question, if this is something either concerning you, friend, family member, please send the details to the seminary. Use the MHT seminary or the RC Institute contact us forms. Give the details. It will be handed to a priest, and they can help assist you further on this. We can't adjudicate or not even comment on marriage cases.
No, as a matter of fact, you should skip those because marriage cases are the
particular.
They are the
so
cross of priests.
So please always, if you're pondering a future super chat, please consider just sending a donation and sending the question via email, as His Excellency has just instructed. Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Oxford, England, Indonesia, Richmond, Virginia, Stratford, Ontario, Canada, Massachusetts, the Netherlands, College Station, Texas, Connecticut, Biala Podlaska, Poland. Moores, $2 Australian. Are there any good reasons for a layperson to study Thomistic philosophy?
There's always a good reason to study Thomistic philosophy. It would give you a better understanding of sacred things and theology. It's like it's the tools of theology, and thinking of being a carpenter without any tools, it's impossible. So that's why you have to tool up. That's why the seminarians, they're just going through exams right now, and they have to tool up for theology. So yes, it's always a good idea, and it just gives you also a knowledge about the world. I mean, even things like what is motion, what is light, what is substance accident, and things like that.
So should people just pick up Summa Contra Gentiles or something like that and get started?
Well, that's a good start, but it's heavy. It's not like reading Alice in Wonderland. It's heavy, 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 and you have to read it carefully and slowly. And so, yeah.
What came first, the church or the Bible?
The church.
I'm just reading the question. Your
Yes,
Excellency.
the church came first. The Bible didn't come about until, there were no scriptures until, I think, St. Paul in the 40s AD. I think that was the first scripture. And Christ never wrote anything down except when he, in the sand, he wrote the sins of the Pharisees who were accusing the woman. It's the only time that he wrote anything down, and he never commanded anybody to write anything down.
Pope Pius V granted all the Spaniards an indult, allowing them not to fast on Fridays. Originally, it dealt with the Spanish kingdom, including South America. Does this now apply to independent South American countries?
I have no idea.
Regarding Chateauneuf de Pape, it pairs excellently with a rack of lamb and certain vegetables, root vegetables. Ireland, Brazil, Farmingville, New York.
Oh, yeah.
$10 from Tom Amatruda. Thank you, Tom. Do you know Bishop Morello?
I never met him. I know of him, but I never met him.
$100 from Kathy Floreno. Thank you, Kathy. If you have a question, please put it in the chat. Someone said, I never change would be a good motto for Episcopal coat of arms. £5 from Jimmy Hunchin. I'd also settle for a ceremonial flushing of the documents.
But we'll do both. We'll reduce them to ashes and then, yes.
And then flush them down the toilet.
Flush them down the toilet, yes.
Burial at sea.
Yes.
Tomislav says that he is in Croatia. Well, Tomislav, then I can tell you Father Trauner goes there regularly. So if you send an email, we can put you in contact with Father Trauner. The mission is in Zagreb. Tommy Lee, £10. Thank you, Tommy. Your Excellency, you spoke of the church being virtually always opposed to revolution. How is this separated from counter-revolution? Is a peasant revolt ever moral? I think potentially the person with using £10, he might be referring to the Pilgrimage of Grace, for example, Your Excellency, in English history, where you had people coming down to London asking for Henry VIII to restore the monasteries and restore the church. I suppose I don't know that.
I wouldn't call that an insurrection or a peasant revolt. I mean, I would say, the fact that they would ask him to do that seems that they would regard him as the king.
But that's not revolutionary. No. Petitioning the king is not revolutionary.
No.
So how is revolution different from counter-revolution? The way that you could say a counter-reformation from the church?
Well, counter-revolution is legitimate if there is some, let's say, disturbance of the correct order that has been, let's say, perpetrated by the revolutionists. A perfect example is the French Revolution, where the Vendée rose up and attacked the revolutionists because they chopped off the head of the legitimate king. You see, and so they were defending the not only the king himself and the honor of the king, but also the whole system of French government. I mean, the French Revolution just took it upon itself to murder the king. So that's legitimate. And the Catholic philosophers say that. In other words, any kind of counter-revolution, as long as it is in favor of an existing legitimate system. See?
Albert Polak Greetings from Warsaw. I would have never guessed with a last name like Polak, Your Excellency. Why is soccer currently permanently banned from the seminary?
Because our seminarians don't know how to play it, and we've had many serious injuries as a result of, all kinds of things, and which are not only injurious to the seminarians, but are very expensive to fix.
So it's a safety issue.
Yeah, they don't know how to play it, and they hurt themselves badly.
So I suppose if we only had South American seminarians would be fine, Your Excellency.
Yes, if they knew how to play it, they would be okay.
fine.
Yes.
Okay. Unfortunately, we have a lot of Americans. What does that say for the state of soccer in America? That's a different discussion, different stream. $5 STM traps. Thank you. And this person says, thank you for posting the classroom lectures, particularly the ones that you do, Your Excellency. I suppose that is new for you. You weren't ever videotaped while you were giving lectures in Ridgefield.
No.
So that's been an evolution.
Yeah.
Where's Wally for $5 Australian? Thank you, Wally. Have you ever been approached by or had anything to do with the alleged Bishop Stephen Hartley in Australia?
Never heard of him.
Robert Zapp for $5. Thank you, Robert. Can His Excellency speak on the current war between Israel and Iran? Israel decided on a preemptive strike. How does that fit or not fit into a just war?
Oh, boy. I tend to see that as King Kong versus Godzilla. And
Well, His Excellency does like Godzilla movies, so he
Yes.
might be there for that one.
Well, in other words, there is, in my opinion, the 1948 takeover of that area, which was known as Palestine, and making it Israel, was illegitimate. It was that the Palestinians had been there since Adrian the Emperor in 130 A.D. thereabouts, and were unmolested and uncontested as the owners of that property, and they were thrown off, and now they're in a miserable situation. I think that's immoral. All right, so that's the source of the problem, is that. So but again, to solve your problems, you have to use legitimate means, and I don't think that terrorism is a legitimate means. Now, whether Israel can dictate to Iran you can't have nuclear weapons, I don't think that it has the right to do that. In other words, who has the right to tell another sovereign country you can't have nuclear weapons?
Israel can do whatever it wants, Your Excellency.
Well, just let me talk. So I think that's the problem, is that this dictatorial attitude that you are not permitted to have nuclear weapons, I don't see the justification for that. Israel has nuclear weapons. So I think but again, you have to use legitimate means and so I would tend to side with the Iranians in this, although I think that Iran has proved itself to be, at least its government, has proved to be something very unacceptable since it overthrew the Shah of Iran back in the 1960s, I think it was.
Himself installed by a U.S. coup, Your Excellency.
Yes, but still, in other words, it was. They've been. Their whole situation with the hostages and under Carter and all. Others, they have manifested themselves as an organization that promotes terrorism. And terrorism is an illegitimate means to achieve your ends. So I think it's King Kong versus Godzilla. It's two monsters that are fighting it out.
Well, one of the monsters is claiming that God gave us the land, Your Excellency. And you've addressed this in previous streams, but how is that argument countered if Jewish people say God gave us this land? Is that true?
Well, he took it away in 70 AD.
And why is that?
Because of their infidelity, and our Lord predicted it, that their infidelity led them to the loss of their title to that land. That title, they were the Canaanites who originally inhabited that land. That land was given to them by God, and Joshua was given the command to take over that land, and which he did. And so it belonged to the Jewish people in view of their vocation to receive and promulgate the Messiah when he came. But their infidelity ruined that. So it ruined their title to that land. And therefore, they don't have a title. So that's why I think that the 1948 decision was something that was very bad. And it's been strife ever since, and it's always going to be strife and warfare. It's never going to be solved. That's my opinion. Now, that's only opinion, so.
£10 from Jimmy Hunjin. Thank you, Jimmy. I always felt that the pilgrimage of grace against the ogre Henry VIII was justified. Someone else noted a 3-hour live stream for the 10,000 subscribers was a nice surprise. Well, it was a surprise to His Excellency also. Could His Excellency and Mr. Heiner do a 3-hour live stream 2 to 3 times a week? 2 or 3 times a year, maybe. That was unexpected. It was just due to the fact that a lot of people had a lot of questions, and His Excellency was good-spirited enough to keep going. It really was a big push for him. We had been actually recording for an hour before that, so His Excellency was in the chair for 4 hours, and I don't think I can ever ask him to do that again. Jimmy Hunjin for £20. Thank you, Jimmy. A Primer of Ecclesiastical Latin by John F. Collins starts from zero knowledge. I recommend it.
There's also a book by Lowe, L-O-W-E, Ecclesiastical Latin, and I can't remember the exact title, but that is very good. We use that actually.
The title's Ecclesiastical Latin?
I can't remember the exact title. It has kind of an odd title. But
what's the last name?
Lowe, L-O-W-E.
Okay.
And it's British. It was published probably about 100 years ago or so. And it's a very good book, and it is available.
Okay. Well, I leave that to the people in the chat to hunt that book down and immediately put it into the chat, so His Excellency will be informed. I would like to donate $100 to the seminary. Please let me know where to send a check. Daryl, if you go to mhtseminary.org/donate, you'll see an address where you can send a U.S. check, or if you're from outside, there's different ways you can transfer money. I was ordained in Poland in 1993 by the former Archbishop of Poznan, Archbishop Jerzy Stroba. So I suppose that's a Novus Ordo priest who wants to make a donation to the seminary, Your Excellency.
I'm not familiar with that, so I can't comment.
Can you interview Bishop Selway for the channel? I'd like to learn more about him. Does he preach often? I don't see his sermons very often. Well, I don't think Bishop Selway is going to be on a live stream anytime soon, Your Excellency.
No, I mean, unless he came up here, he might do one. It doesn't come too often.
Father LeMay wants to know if you think Bishop Pfeiffer's consecration is valid or invalid.
Well, I saw the video, and I would say it's invalid.
Why?
Because the consecrator, if he was valid, and I think there's a big question mark there, it messed up the form in such a way that it could never be considered valid.
And the internet has one, again here, Your Excellency, Prima Latina Teacher Manual, Introduction to Christian Latin by Lay Lowe.
No, that's not it. No.
All right. Nice try, Lewis.
If I could run to my room, I could get it. But
he can't because he's stapled to the chair for the moment. Christ is King, $5. Why has His Excellency changed his position? Is this Canon 2200? On presuming the guilt of the Novus Ordo from his paper On the Material Pope to the May 2024 newsletter. Does Canon 2200 ring a bell?
I think it has to do with heresy, but I just
Have you changed your position on presuming the guilt of the Novus Ordo?
Oh, no, you can... No, you...
Does this ring a bell?
Yes, that rings a bell. Again, you have to always distinguish the juridical order from the real order. You presume, canon law presumes guilt if you say a heresy, but that doesn't mean that it crosses into the juridical order. That means the sin of heresy is presumed and that your guilt is presumed. But that does not cross into the juridical order. That's the constant confusion.
His Excellency said you don't presume their guilt versus you do presume their guilt in the May 2024 newsletter.
No. You presume their guilt in the order of sin, but you cannot presume their guilt in the order of juridical order.
Did you change your position?
No, I've always had that position. No,
okay.
He has misunderstood it.
So His Excellency has said that he has not changed his position. So if you want to clarify that with a follow-up, please feel free.
Yeah.
We have a second try, Your Excellency, Church Latin for Beginners and Elementary...
Yes, that's it. Church Latin for Beginners
Bing.
by Lowe. And it's available on the internet.
Thank you, Tom Bretislav, for tracking that down. Church Latin for Beginners, an elementary course of exercises in ecclesiastical Latin.
Yes, it's excellent.
Their Heresy. He's saying they're heresy. You don't presume their guilt regarding heresy. Christ is King, if you could retype that. We're coming into the final 5 minutes of our live stream, so if you want to retype your question altogether and just put in the chat, you don't have to put up another super chat. I'll do my best to re-ask that to His Excellency. £10 from Jimmy Hunchen. Bishop Hartley is to be avoided. He's ex Novus Ordo and ill-educated. He refers to Annibal Bugnini as a cardinal on his chapel's website. Your Excellency, Father LeMay wants to know, how is Bishop Neville doing? Is he still in Michigan?
Yes. He keeps very much to himself. We fill in for him once in a while when he travels, but I don't hear too much from him.
Okay. LDP for $5. Could Bishop Sanborn explain why Catholics must assent to papal teaching even when it's not declared ex cathedra?
Because it's first of all, it's the law of the Church, and that you must give at least what is known as religious assent, because the Pope is the teacher of the Church, and you would assume and presume by law that what he is saying is true. So you can't say, well, I just reject that. You see, that would be a sin to do that. And most of the time he's not defining. Encyclicals typically don't define. They may, but typically it's just ordinary teaching.
And Catholics should assent to this because
give religious assent. Yes, that's what it's not.
And why, Your Excellency?
Because he's the teacher of the whole Church. It's out of respect for him as teacher of the whole Church.
Right, we're in our final 2 minutes of the stream, so if you have final questions, please get them in. Otherwise, we'll have to wrap up. If you're watching this stream afterwards, please continue to hit like, put comments, questions. As we said before, the best place if you want to get a question answered by a priest is to use the Contact Us form and send us an email. If you simply want to comment on the video, that is helpful. It pushes it out to the algorithm, but do not assume that the clergy monitor the comment section to answer your questions. That's not a good place to put a question after the stream is over. Pre-Vatican II Catholic Show, 7 Singapore dollars. Thank you, Nick. Your Excellency, how often do priests from the SSPX, Fraternity of St. Peter, Novus Ordo, and other organizations reach out privately to the Institute with questions, or shall we say visit? How often do you have that?
What do we have?
How often do you have SSPX, Fraternity, Novus Ordo, other organizations reach out privately to the Institute?
Once in a great while. I mean, we've had some visits from some of those persons. We keep it very quiet, but we're friendly to everybody. I know some Novus Ordo priests. I have known them. I was just talking to one today. Very friendly. I mean,
went to seminary together with some of these people.
And it's not and I've spoken to SSPX priests and never FSSP. I don't think I've ever spoken, but if I met one on the plane, or I don't think I've ever had one, but because this, I mean, even a conservative Novus Ordo has some affinity to what we're doing. He sees that there's something wrong, and I was just I was dialoguing with a Protestant down in North Carolina this past few days ago. I'll talk to anybody, and I'll talk nicely to them. But I did tell this fellow, I said, I do have to attempt to convert you because, as you know, because he studies the Catholic faith quite a bit, the Catholic Church is the one true church outside of which there is no salvation. And he said, yes, I understand that.
Well, to be fair, His Excellency is referring to a Presbyterian who is reading St. Therese.
St. Teresa just finished it. Yes, Story of a Soul.
St. Thomas.
St. Thomas Aquinas, the Catechism of the Council of Trent, and St. Augustine.
A lot of hope for this.
I think there's some hope, yes.
I mean, St. Therese is, I think, going to take care of him.
And he's made the comment that what strikes him about Catholicism is that it has this idea of giving yourself completely to God, where that's absent in Protestantism. He told me that, and he saw that in a Story of a Soul, that complete sacrifice to God, so
that's such a wonderful book.
And he said, I think I meant for the ministry, meaning the Presbyterian ministry, but he said, I would like to visit MHT seminary. So I know I don't understand him, but he's certainly not closed to Catholicism.
Well, as you can see, His Excellency does not accept that proselytism is solemn nonsense.
Correct.
You're going for that proselytism full bore, Your Excellency.
Yes, but it was a dialogue, really. I mean, we had dinner, and
you were building bridges.
I was building bridges. It never got heated, and I gave him some Catholic objections. He answered them, went back and forth, and he told me a lot of things about Protestantism which I didn't know. And at the end of the dinner, I said, "We both have learned a lot tonight, haven't we?" And I'm thinking,
the true encounter.
The true encounter, yes. And it's kind of funny, but it doesn't have to be bitter. Any kind of proselytism doesn't have to be bitter. It can be over a nice dinner and very cordial. And he was cordial, and I was cordial. And no, it was informative. A lot of things I didn't know about Protestants, I found out. And it's good to know that, for future reference.
So I'm going to close the chat for further super chats. You'll have to save it for next time. I also have to save this book for next time. I actually told His Excellency in the live stream that we did for the seminary, I talked about the formation, which was the front part of the book. And I said, we'll talk about the apostolate. I never even got to open the book, Your Excellency. No. Just too many questions.
I should do one of these every single day.
I'll wrap up by a rephrase from the person who asked the chat. And I think he is trying to phrase it correctly. His Excellency said on being Pope materially that Canon 2200 presumed an external violation of the law, which involves pertinacity, which doesn't apply to Novus Ordites. But in May 2024, His Excellency said it does apply and their guilt is presumed.
I'd have to see the context of both of those statements.
Okay. So you're saying you don't remember everything that you write for the last 30 years?
No. So, I have to see the context of
Crisis King, if you send an email, I can print that out for His Excellency and he can answer the question either in the next stream or he can send an email to you clarifying that. He doesn't recall precisely what you're speaking about. All right. As always, Your Excellency, thank you so much for your time. And thank you to all the people who put in super chats. Thank you for your generosity towards the Institute and towards the formation of priests, as we saw on the MHT live stream. If you'd like to help us, one easy way that you can do so is by hitting the like button and sharing this video with anyone in your life, potentially a Presbyterian or a Novus Ordo or a Society of St. Pius X person, and see what they think of what His Excellency has to say about the state of the church and the world. And who knows what could happen from there. As always, Your Excellency, thank you for your time.
Thank you.